Hey everybody, it's Chris from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're going to get started right away. I see Shane hovering over there by the stage. So yeah, we're going to get started shortly. Thanks for joining us.
Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. We'd like to welcome you tonight to an informational event sponsored by Let's Talk Alberta. Let's Talk Alberta is an educational society where our goal is to do just what the name says. Let's have a good conversation. Let's talk. 2 questions before we go any further. How many of you here have never attended a meeting like this before? Oh, excellent. Second question, how many of you received in the mail a pamphlet announcing this? Oh, wonderful. Great, okay, that's good. You too. Last night, yeah. You will get them. I don't know. Could be. It's Canada Post. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so just a few housekeeping items. Bathrooms are located out this main door that you came in and to your left. The emergency exits are the main door and the 2 here on my right side. If you haven't yet, please go up to the refreshment table, and there is coffee and there is a cold peach drink. There's a sign-up table at the back. I mean, many of you have already signed, but if you haven't, we'd appreciate it if you did. Just let us know where you're from, and you can give us your phone number or your email address or both, and we will let you know when we're coming back to this area. And for sure, we're coming back at least 2 times before the referendum. There are trifold brochures at the back table. They're absolutely free. The flags are free. The only thing that we ask by donation are the larger booklets that Chris has written, because they cost so much to print. So we do ask for donation, and the lawn signs are also costly. So those are by donation as well. And the 4x8s, yes, there are 4x8 signs that you can speak to Shane about, and they are also by donation. There's the lawn signs we talked about. The merchandise tables, if you haven't been there, please take a look. And if you have a hard time starting a conversation about independence or anything about Alberta's freedom, wear one of our t-shirts, one of our hoodies, and that should get a conversation going. And yes, they are overpriced, and there's a reason for that. We are fully dependent on you for these events to get us from one place to the other and to keep doing these. No one is paid. Our speakers are not paid. The only thing we do with the money is we try to pay the venues off and give our speakers gas money. We use the money for printing, which costs an enormous amount of money. And also the mailings are very expensive. So whatever you do choose to give, know that it is well spent. Yeah, we're not funded by the government or large corporations. So it's people like you and me that keep this thing rolling. So tonight, what we're offering is a chance for everybody to be able to have a conversation. And that seems to get harder every day. Like people who have a differing opinion, we used to be able to talk together, but we can't anymore. So this is a place that you can come, you can have a difference of opinion. We do ask people who have different opinions to come and speak. Don't always get them. In fact, we probably have never had one that has a differing opinion, but they're welcome. And we welcome people who have questions, who are on the fence, who are absolutely opposed, to come and discuss with us, to ask questions, tell us what makes you go one way or the other. As much as you are here to hear the speakers, we want to hear you. And that's, for us, I think, the most exciting part of the evening. Not saying anything against the speakers. I love hearing you speak, but we do love to hear your questions and your comments. So after the three speakers have spoken, we're going to have a very brief intermission, maybe 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have a time for questions and answers. There'll be a mic being passed around, but if you feel uncomfortable and you don't want to come up to the mic, but you have this burning question, come and see me at the back table. I'll write down your question and I can ask it for you. So during the time that the speakers are up, we're going to ask that you hold your comments and questions till that question and answer period. The three pillars that undergird our goals and our values are faith, family, and freedom. We traditionally always either begin our meetings in prayer or end them in prayer. And tonight is no different. So I'm going to ask Patty Vold if she wouldn't mind coming to the podium and leading us in prayer.
Those of us who are short of stature, that's a big step. I always wonder how my grandchildren go up regular steps. The 1.5-year-old, her knees just about up to her chin. It's not easy. So we're going to open in prayer. We're going to invite the Lord to this meeting. Father, we thank you for the people gathered here. We thank you for this country, this province that we live in, and we know that you are blessing us. And we know also that you have given us a job, and that's to be stewards of the land that you have given to us. So tonight, Lord, we ask that you be with us and help us remember as we go out and we meet different people. We ask that we help us show them grace and patience. We thank you for the speakers tonight, for Chris and Emmett and Shane, and we ask that you be in their words. So Lord, we just ask for your presence here tonight, and we just thank you for all that you do, the seen and the unseen. In Jesus' name, amen.
So our first speaker is a good friend, and he's a very smart guy. And I've said it before, I would never, ever want to play trivia with this guy. So Shane has a lot of experience in the oil industry. He's worked on just about every continent, and he's been involved in working towards seeing a free and prosperous Alberta for a very, very long time. He has knowledge on many, many subjects, but tonight he's going to bring you a history lesson. And I'm sure you'll be either very surprised or very mad by the time he's finished. So I'd just love to invite Shane up to the podium. Yeah, it's a very long way down.
See, I offered to give her a piggyback ride. She didn't want it.
No, because he's so crippled as it is.
Do you want help too? I'm no better, but I'm a little taller, I guess. So, oh, you're going to adjust it a little bit more, Max? There we go. I have to use this because otherwise I do this with the microphone and drive Max crazy. So, as Sandy kind of said, I'm going to give a little bit of the historical relationship between Ottawa and what is now Alberta and Saskatchewan. So in the 1880s to about 1903, 1904, there was a huge American settler movement. They were coming up into the territories in droves. They were forming little enclaves, and they were making Ottawa very, very nervous. How many here have ever heard of a little spot on the map called USONA? There's a few people. It's more than in the average crowd. I actually live 6 miles from USONA. How many people know what USONA stands for? The United States of North America. In the early 1900s, by about 1902, 1903, the population of USONA was around 500 people. The population of USONA right now is about 8 people. It has shrunk a little bit. How many people here know the town of Rimbey? Almost everybody knows Rimbey. Its original name was Kansas Ridge. The city of Airdrie, that was Yankee Valley. All over what is now Alberta and Saskatchewan, there are towns that used to have names, American-sounding names, or still do have American-sounding names. And that is because of the American settler movement that came up. And this, like I said, this made Ottawa very, very nervous. And it was one of the main reasons why they decided to cut out Alberta and Saskatchewan as provinces, because it's a lot easier to absorb a territory than it is a province. In 1904, on the steps of the Manitoba legislature, Sir Clifford Sifton made the following statement. We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people to the east, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way to our prosperity. Now, why do we care what somebody said 124 years ago? Well, the main reason is that he was the main author of the Alberta Act and the Saskatchewan Act. So on September 1st, 1905, Alberta and Saskatchewan were legislated into being. Now, Alberta and Saskatchewan are the only 2 provinces that were legislated into being. Every other province negotiated their way into Confederation. But we weren't given that option. We were legislated by an act of Ottawa. But when they wrote, how many people here have had a chance to ever read the Alberta Act? Oh, that one you're a little lower on. I would recommend that everybody go to the Government of Alberta website, download a copy of the Alberta Act. It's only a few pages long. And in there, you will notice that we were given the name of a province, but we were given the rights and responsibilities of a territory. And everybody should read that. So in 1913, the federal government passed the Railroad Acts Amendment. And what that did is it made it illegal for all regional railways to cross provincial boundaries. So what did that mean? That meant that if you loaded, let's say in Stettler, with grain headed for Thunder Bay, as soon as you hit the Saskatchewan border, you'd have to offload it all onto a Saskatchewan carrier. Then it would have to be offloaded at the Manitoba border. And then it would have to be offloaded again at the Ontario border. This became a very financial difficulty. Up here, you had Alberta Northern Railways. The two biggest in Alberta were Alberta Northern Railways and Alberta Central Railways. By 1939, Alberta Central Railways was out of business. In the 1950s, Alberta Northern Railways was bought, but they remained under their name until 1972 when they finally changed over and started operating as CN. Now, there's only two remnants left of those two railways. If you go down Taylor Drive in Red Deer, you will see a pillar on the side of Taylor Drive that is one of the original trestle bridges from Alberta Central Railway. And if you go to Rycroft, you will see the last remaining Alberta Northern Railway caboose. But the interesting thing is they made all of Eastern railways exempt. So it only applied to Western railways. So then in 1930, the provinces negotiated with Ottawa for the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement, which returned all of the natural resources to the provinces. However, at the time, Ottawa made it very clear that they were still going to manage Alberta and Saskatchewan's resources. In 1931, on December 11th, the King decreed, after it was passed by the House of Lords in London, the Statute of Westminster. Now, what does the Statute of Westminster do? Statute of Westminster gives sovereignty over the land and resources to the people in care of the provinces, not in care of Ottawa, in care of the provinces. What does that mean? That means that there is no federal land in any province in this country. That means that the national parks are contrary to the Statute of Westminster. And if we were to enforce it, we would never have had something like Jasper occur, because we could have managed the forests properly in the first place. And even if you did have a fire, we wouldn't have been blocked at the park's boundaries with our firefighting equipment. So in 1935, the federal government formed a new marketing board. And at the time, it was voluntary, but we all got to know it as the Canada Wheat Board. And like I said, it was voluntary, but I've been hearing from a bunch of farmers that were kids at the time, but their parents sent their grain all the way to Ottawa and never got paid for it. And this was one of the ways that they tried to feed the East and starve the West originally, was through the Wheat Board. They would ship it down, and then they would send the farmer a bill for the shipping and never pay them for the grain. So in 1946, the Wheat Board was made mandatory for Western Canadian farmers. So what did that mean? So if I wanted to sell my grain as an Easterner, if I lived in Ontario, I would pull up to my grain bin, load my truck, and I could go across the line and sell my grain to the U.S. If I lived west of the Manitoba border, If I wanted to sell my grain to the US, I would go to my grain bin, I would load my grain. I'd pull into the local elevator, I'd offload it. I'd pull around to the far side of the elevator, buy my grain back from the elevator with a profit to the Canada Wheat Board, and then I was authorized to sell it. And this stated, the Canada Wheat Board stayed in effect until 2012. And the reason that it finally was defeated and repealed was thanks to a group of farmers known as the Dirty Dozen. 13 farmers that decided that it was, from both Alberta and Saskatchewan, that decided it was worth it to go to jail to run the border. So they spent between 6 months and a year in jail for doing it. And this upset Western Canadian farmers greatly, and they protested, and Harper's government repealed it in 2012. Otherwise, we would still be under the Wheat Board. So farmers, you can thank those 13 that went to jail for that. That would take me far too long. We have to be out of here by 11. So, 1947, Alberta had just discovered what our vast resource of oil was. We knew we had oil before that, but we didn't know how much we had. So as soon as we discovered how much we had, the federal government brought in the federal control of oil pricing and pipelines. That meant that we could not set our own prices. We had to rely on Ottawa to set our pricing for oil. Also, we could not put a pipeline in the ground without federal permission. And this stayed in place until 1950, when they finally repealed it after our provincial government fought with them. How many in this room are old enough to remember the great flag debate of 1965? Well, a quarter of the room. And I'm sure that there's some people, I can look at them, they're not that old. But anyways, okay, so in 1965, our then Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson, decided that we needed a flag that represented the people of Canada. So the red bars on the side represent the oceans, and the leaf in the middle represents the people. Well, John Diefenbaker stood up in the House of Commons, and he said, why are you not using the Manitoba maple, which is found from coast to coast? Why are you using the sugar maple, which is only found in Eastern Canada? Lester B. Pearson did not like this, so he forced closure on the bill. And when it went to vote, not a single Western Canadian MP voted for the current flag. Things were so up, people were so upset in Western Canada that in 1967, just 2 years later, during the centennial of Canada, many, many towns and cities in Western Canada refused to fly the maple leaf flag. Instead, they flew the red ensign, which is also an official flag of Canada. To this day, we have two official flags. But by the time I started school in the 1970s, knew nothing about it. We stood up in class every morning. I salute the flag, the emblem of my country. To her, I pledge my love and loyalty. Never heard a word about the great flag debate. It was kind of memory hold until I was doing research years later and found out all about it. So in 1973, the federal government decided once again to go after our oil. And so they brought in the oil exportation taxation policies, and Alberta's oil profits were capped. So we were always told that we had an energy crisis in the 70s. It was a policy crisis. So if you were an oil company and you had a cap on your oil production of 100,000 barrels, and if you produced 101,000 barrels, all the profit from that extra barrel were going straight to Ottawa, would you produce over your cap? Wouldn't make any sense. So this stayed in effect for 18 months. And our then Premier Lougheed fought tooth and nail to get it repealed. And finally, in 1974, they repealed it. But don't worry, they weren't done with us. Just 6 years later, they brought in the National Energy Program. Now, the National Energy Program had everything that the 73-74 bill had in it. Plus, you add to that the fact that we now had to give priority shipping to Eastern Canada at their price. So their price was at times up to 80% below market value that we had to ship to them at. This stayed in place until 1988. Now, they would have you believe that they did it because they really loved Western Canada. It was an election year when Brian Mulroney repealed it. Now, he used it as we're going to do this for Western Canada. But in reality, it was costing them more to produce or to enforce the program than they were getting out of it, because oil prices had dropped so low that it just was not economically feasible to keep the program going. But he used it as an election year tool and confused everybody with it. In the 1980s, we also had several other things happen in the 80s and 90s. First thing is 1982, the Constitution was brought home to Canada. I'm not going to go into why that wasn't necessarily a good thing, except to say that before 1982, we were under British common law, which we had a lot more rights and freedoms under common law than we have now under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So then also in the early 1980s, we had the first Quebec referendum. And then in 95, we had the second Quebec referendum. And after the second Quebec referendum, the federal government went to the Supreme Court of Canada and said, is it even possible for a province to secede from Confederation? Supreme Court came back after 2 years of looking at it with a ruling and said, yes, it is. These are the steps that a province needs to take in order to secede from Confederation. So the federal government took that, twisted it a little bit, and came out with the Clarity Act. So the Clarity Act is the law of the land, and it is what we are following in order to try and get our independence. But the actual ruling, it has a lot more flexibility to it than even the Clarity Act. So then we're going to jump forward to 2012. And in 2012, the federal government came out with Bill C-38, the Jobs, Growth, and Prosperity Act, which gave Ottawa complete control over all of Alberta's projects, major projects. So what did that mean? That meant we couldn't build a pipeline without their permission. We couldn't build a high rise without their permission. We couldn't build a major highway without their permission. Then in 2016, they brought in the federal carbon pricing. And we know what that has done to our economy. 2019 was a banner year because they brought in Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines Act, and Bill C-48, the tanker ban off the West Coast. Both of those crippled our oil industry. So last fall, Premier Daniel Smith wrote an MOU with Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, that would have removed those 4 bills. But within 1 week of that MOU being signed, the House of Commons voted and defeated that MOU. Whether you agree or disagree with it, the fact is that they voted, and over half of the Western Canadian MPs voted against that MOU. So it's not partisan on which party is against Alberta. It's both all 3 parties, 4 parties, whatever. It's a uniparty. They do not want, as Pierre Elliott Trudeau said when he brought in the National Energy Program in 1980, we do not want Alberta to become the economic engine of Canada. But I'm sorry, but we have become it. We are the economic engine of Canada. Where we go, the rest of Canada goes eventually. And that now brings us to modern time. And right now, there's 3 bills that should be everybody's concern. One is now a law. As of July 18th, Bill C9 is the law. But we're going to start with Bill C8, which is still working its way through the House of Commons. Bill C8 is the internet censorship law. What does this one do? This one, with the stroke of the minister's pen, can take you off the internet. And I don't mean just you lose your ISP. This means your entire internet identity is gone. No more online banking. No more, you won't even be able to use, because remember, even an ATM goes out via the internet. You won't be able to use an ATM machine. You are off the internet entirely. This one, if it is of serious concern, but Bill C9, which is actually the law, is the one that should concern everyone. And if you add Bill C8 becoming law to Bill C9, it is, in my opinion, the start of a downward slope from which Canada will never recover. Under Bill C9, which is the anti-hate speech law, all it takes is for somebody to complain that I've said something hateful and I will be arrested. That'll be sorted out later and I have a chance to win. But the problem is they have the right to seize all of my assets and they don't have to give them back under that bill. So if they do arrest me, and believe me, I'm expecting it because they call us hateful all the time just for speaking our minds at the front. I expect that to happen. They can't do it during the writ period, but shortly afterwards, I kind of almost expect it to happen. And under that bill, the city of Edmonton already tried. So our premier has said that they will not enforce it in this province. I actually asked her directly about Bill C9 at the town hall in Red Deer exactly a week ago today. I guess it would be. Week tomorrow. And I asked her, I said, what is the government going to do about Bill C9? And she said that we're not going to enforce it in this province. Well, there's a problem with that. If they use the federal notwithstanding clause, that means that you could not be charged in this province. But by using the we're not going to enforce it, I can't be arrested within this province. But that means the second I go to an airport or cross a provincial boundary, I can be arrested. So they need to use the federal notwithstanding clause on it. Quebec's used it 1,500 plus times in the last 40 years. Why can't we use it once for something this important? Now we go to Bill C-22, which is the anti-encryption law. And under that, currently under the current law, if they want to, they figure that I'm doing something nefarious with any one of you, and we're having a telephone conversation, they have to go to the courts and get a warrant to be able to tap my phone lines, and to be able to hear what I'm saying. Under Bill C-22, they don't need to do that anymore. They can listen in on any of your internet conversations unfettered. This is why Signal, Facebook, WhatsApp, all of these social media companies that have encryption on their sites are threatening to leave Canada if Bill C-22 gets passed. Because under that, if they open up their encryption, they're not just opening up their Canadian customers to liability, they're opening up their worldwide customers to liability. Because once somebody gets into their system, they're in it. And so that's why they're threatening to pull out of Canada because of it. So it's very, very nefarious action on the part of our government to not give us legal protection. I have no problem if somebody that they can prove that somebody is doing something criminal, that they be able to look, but to have open access and have no encryption is beyond the veil. Well, now that I've made you all very happy, I'm going to invite our next guest up here, which is Emmett Kelsey. Emmett farms and raises draft horses just outside of Edmonton. And he has been involved in the freedom movement since the truckers convoys in 22. So I would like to ask Emmett to come on up and speak.
Thank you very much. One moment while this is set to my height. So I used to actually work in the Grande Prairie area. And when the chance came to come up here to speak, I actually jumped at it because I kind of miss this community. What I liked about the Peace Country is I find it's the true heart of Alberta. Because in the Peace Country, people still take responsibility for their own actions. They work hard and they're neighborly. And I think we need to have more of that back in our province. So thank you for having me today. I don't have as many gray hairs as Shane or Chris, so I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to tell you about all the technical benefits to leaving or remaining in Canada. But what really sits with me is the importance of actually having conversations. Ever since the pandemic, people started to become tribal. People stopped talking to each other. We were uninvited from each other's houses because we felt a certain way on a topic. And I think that's been very unhealthy. And we need to come back to actually talking. I got a bit of brain fog, so I'm going to go back to my notes here. So what I can do is I can give you the tools to help you think about why we got here in the first place and what you can do to make an informed decision come October 19th or on any topic, really. And the drive to leave Canada, it's a symptom of a deeper issue within our culture. And the only constant in our universe is that everything changes. So we're going to have different opinions. Relationships grow, relationships fade, and that's okay. And that's our relationship with Canada. Sometimes we're going to agree on things, sometimes we're going to disagree on things. And now we're here to talk about a referendum about having a referendum, which I think is kind of confusing. Like, I don't recall when I broke up with my girlfriend asking her for permission to ask if I could break up with her. Like, we kind of just agreed to disagree and we went our own ways. But this is the process we have to follow. Just like you have a chessboard with chess pieces, you've got the table set, and these are the rules that we have to go by in this circumstance, right? So, yeah, here we are. Like Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. And the drive to leave Canada is a symptom of a shift within our culture. And societies are built on culture and the collective will of people. Laws and judgments are all downstream of the collective will of a people. And currently, the collective will of our society is becoming more and more incoherent. And I think that this incoherence is stemming from us no longer talking to each other. And one thing that I'm very grateful about us being here is that Chris Scott has extended the olive branch to both sides to come together and start having a conversation. Unfortunately, a lot of the remaining Canada people have not opted to come to these town halls, but the opportunity has been extended to them in good faith so we can have these conversations. And I'm intentionally going to take a neutral stance in my presentation today to get people comfortable with having conversations no matter where you stand. Because healthy discussion requires an understanding. We can agree on what the problem is in situations, but we often have different solutions to problems. And that's where we can start to disagree with people on things. And it's possible to have a disagreement without thinking the other person is terrible. For example, I've got a friend that is a clerk at the legislature. He's a staunch NDP advocate. Personally, I lean conservative, but we often go for coffee just to talk to each other. He tries to look under the hood of this brain and see how I feel on certain topics. And I do the same with him. And we come to each other with a genuine openness to understand each other. There's a lot of things we agree on and what we disagree on. We try to find out why we disagree on them, and that we're both coming at it from a position of empathy. We want to solve a problem. We just have different ideas on how the problem should be solved. And that doesn't mean that we should hate each other for wanting to take a different approach. But for the most part, we aren't really talking anymore. I don't think leaving Canada is going to solve all of our problems, but I don't think staying in Canada is going to solve all our problems either. Because Alberta's independence question is not the big problem here. It's a symptom of the bigger problem. The problem isn't a certain president or ministers or lines on a map. Those are all results of culture. It's all downstream. What I think the problem is it's you and it's me. I think we as citizens have traded in our citizenship for our slavery. We've not only stopped talking to each other, but we've also checked out on our politics in general. For example, most of us, we just vote at an election, and that's essentially as much as we do that's political in terms of actual action. So if an election is once every 4 years, and you're taking 2 hours every 4 years to participate in your democracy, mathematically, that's a 0.006% participation in your democracy. And I think that, in a sense, is just checking out of our society. And it's not a passing grade, and I think it's why we're starting to see things crumble in the West like it is. And we also came to the belief that we shouldn't even be talking politics with each other. And then we wonder why we have both Ottawa and Edmonton coming down on us with these tyrannical central planned policies. We disagree with them, but we're not really doing much to get involved to change them. So I think we need to start talking more about Alberta politics, and we need to get more involved. Let me circle back to the culture and where I think Albertans' culture and Canadian culture starts to become distinct. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my phone now. So, many Canadians support fiscal equity. That's equality of outcome, no matter how much value you bring to the table as a Canadian. Socially, that manifests as intersectionality. Many Canadians believe that a demographic of people should be uplifted, identified, and either uplifted or repressed to enforce a certain baseline of equality of social outcome, a social equity. For example, if you look back to the most recent NDP convention, there were certain people that were holding up privilege cards so they could get in the front of the line. That's part of a tool to ensure that there's equity. So that's just an ethic that members of the NDP hold, and to them, they feel like that is the right thing to do. Now, where I think Albertans become a little bit distinct, I think many Albertans believe in equality of opportunity and that outcomes should not be tampered with. And it's the opportunity to succeed without penalty and the opportunity to fail and learn from your mistakes and to rebuild with resilience. And that's where many Albertans become different from Canadians. And that's our cultural divide that we are starting to see form. But which ethic is the right one? Equality or equity? And I think that's a pretty common question, and it's an important question that often comes up in times of scarcity. And I don't think that we should be frowning down on people that have these discussions. Personally, I believe the opportunity to fail is sacred, and it's the only way for true success. And forcing all parts of the collective to be economically tethered to each other guarantees collective failure, and it's consequential for everyone. So, let's say hypothetically speaking, Canada is a ship, and if it's going down, should Alberta go down with the ship? Or, if Alberta separates, are we only prolonging our own decline? I think these are some big questions, but once again, these are questions about the symptom of a problem and not the root of the problem. Again, I think the root of the problem is that you and I checked out of society, and we let others dictate our politics and teach our kids. We gave our responsibilities away, and now discovered that our rights have also been given up. And that's because rights and responsibilities are one and the same. So if you really want to take back your rights and your access to affordability, you must retake your responsibilities. And this is bigger than the Alberta question, which stems from it. Ask yourselves this: are you willing to do what it takes to start getting involved? Will you do more than vote once every 4 years? And will you be willing to talk at the dinner tables, the public squares, or anywhere? Will you join a party and influence your town, city, or country? There's lots that you can do, and it all starts with you. And no matter which way this referendum to have a referendum goes, there are critical underlying issues that must be talked about. So let's talk. Without discussion, there's no awareness. And without awareness, we are all lost. I think tyranny will get as bad as we let it, and its greatest ally is our fear. And it needs people of good conscience to remain silent. So what I think we need to do is we need to start to wake up, we need to start to speak up, and we need to start to show up. So that's the end of what I had written for my speech here. Let me, thank you. I appreciate you. So Shane introduced me. Now I have the pleasure of telling you what I think about Chris. I think Chris, like me, is a little bit crazy. It takes a special kind of person to be willing to take a stand, start to speak up and show up, and actually start to suffer consequences for taking a stance that goes against what the public consensus might be. And that takes a certain level of courage. Chris Scott, he owns the Whistle Stop Cafe. I think to me, it's been a bit of a mecca for people that believe in freedom. It's a place where we can convene and be supportive of each other and stand up for our own rights and freedoms. And I have deep admiration for Chris keeping that business going and for continuing to be involved in Let's Talk Alberta. Another thing that I think Chris does great is he gets to the root of a question, because quite often when someone asks a question, it's not the exact issue. There's an underlying thing. And Chris has a talent where he can get to the root of an underlying problem and offer a solution. So that's something that excites me when I hear Chris speak, and I hope you are excited to hear Chris speak as I am. So with that, please give up a round of applause for Chris.
I asked Max to move the mic stand because I've lost a lot of weight and I wanted to make sure you could see me without the, yeah. It'd have to be a pretty big podium to hide me. Anyway, thank you all for joining us tonight. It's absolutely fantastic to be back in Grande Prairie. Generally, when I've come to Grande Prairie, I come up here with a really big bag packed and lots of tools, and I leave with less patience and a lot of money. Grande Prairie has been really, really good to me over the years. I moved to Alberta in 2000, and since then, I've spent a considerable amount of time up here building with you and working and prospering. And that's kind of what Alberta is all about. Alberta is a place where people have been able to come and work hard and prosper, right? How many people in this room are not originally from Alberta? Wow. Let me guess. Newfoundland? No, just kidding. Alberta is it's distinct from the rest of Canada, I believe. As a matter of fact, the prairie provinces are. And there's a reason for that, because in Alberta, we've traditionally, and I use the word we very loosely because I'm talking back into like the late 1800s, we've traditionally spent most of our time surviving the harsh winters, surviving nature, surviving fires, surviving floods, surviving drought. And to do those things, we've had to work really, really hard. And not everybody made it. We've had to work hard, and we've had to focus on what's coming, focus on what's ahead. And in doing so, we've also kind of kept an eye on what our neighbors were doing. In Alberta and Saskatchewan, if your neighbor is having issues, we see this all the time, they're having issues and they can't get their crop off or whatever, generally the neighbors will come together and they'll go help. That's what we do here. That's Alberta's culture. Working hard, prospering, playing together, and taking care of each other. So when I hear people talking about, Alberta talking about their future as just a bunch of people whining, that's quite offensive to me. And I actually feel like I need to call the Edmonton City Police and file a report about that, but I unfortunately lost the number when they deleted the post off Facebook. So I say these things to give you kind of an idea of what I believe Alberta is. And I see something amazing in the future for Alberta, and it really doesn't have much to do with October, believe it or not. It has a lot more to do with us. And I say that because in the last 6 years, I've seen something that I never saw in the rest of my life. And that is people working together in a political situation to take back control of their futures and tell the people that want to govern us, like, no, you can't do this to us. This is something that we don't generally see in Canada. Canada is a very politically apathetic country. I think in Canada, I said 6%. I think Shane corrected me. It's maybe 3 or 4%. Only 3 or 4% of people have a membership in a political party. Did you know that? That just blows my mind. In the United States, it's 60, 70, 80% in some places. There's a different culture. But some of the things that we've gone through in Alberta in the last, well, really since 1905, but specifically in my mind is like the last 20 years or so, they've given us common cause. We have a common theme amongst Albertans that transcend politics. It's not a left thing. It's not a right thing. We're seeing the prosperity that we've enjoyed and the freedoms that we've enjoyed, not just threatened, but like actively condemned by Canada in some cases. We see policies coming from the federal government that specifically target our industry. And just to point out a couple, the No More Tankers, the No More Tankers bill, and No More Pipelines bill, the tanker ban, those are two specific ones, the emissions cap. That stuff all really hurt Alberta. And it's not something that Albertans asked for. As a matter of fact, we're kind of up in arms. Our premier wrote strongly worded letters. They were strongly worded, so strongly worded that Ottawa read them and threw them directly in the trash. And it's less concerning to me that the federal government would do these things because we know governments do that. Governments and politicians, they try and take more, they want more power, they want more tax dollars, they want more control. They're going to do that. It's the nature of the political beast. The problem is, as an Albertan, I have never, ever felt like my vote could change the situation Alberta is in. I didn't feel like that when Justin Trudeau first started campaigning. And at first I thought it was a joke, but we thought Trump campaigning was a joke too, didn't we? I felt that my vote really wasn't going to make a difference in the last federal election. And I was proven right at 8:09 when our election was called, while our ballot boxes were still sitting in the ballot place. So if you can't solve these problems or fix these issues by using the tools afforded to you by the group, by Canada in this case, what do you have left? You know, are we going to just accept that Alberta's voice isn't recognized within Confederation? Are we going to continue to be placated with a potential pipeline deal? Or are we going to continue to be confused by referendums in which Albertans overwhelmingly say that we're tired of hemorrhaging $30 billion a year to Ottawa? Or are we actually going to do something different? And the something different is quite scary. Well, not for me. I like this type of thing. I like the risk. I like the big reward from the big risk. When I don't have to go to the casino anymore, but when I didn't do the penny slots. I tell you that right now. My Jessica, she'd be sitting there for 3 hours with $20, betting 5 cents, and I'm like, that's boring. Let's do $25 a press, and she's having a heart attack. But I'm like, no, it's a big risk and big reward. Totally different because it's always the House against you in that case. But in our case, we are the House. We do make the rules, whether those who control the rules right now like it or not. It's us who decide how we're going to be governed. And I'm not just talking within the structure of Canada or under the Canadian Constitution. I'm talking about you as human beings. There are two ways that we as human beings can be governed. We can be forced to accept rules and governance on us, or we can consent to being governed in one way or another. In Canada, I guess it's not really forcing, but it wasn't us that decided the rules for the people that want to govern us. We didn't get together in a room like this and draft a constitution and say, hey, we're going to have this type of government, this type of party. We didn't have an amazing Declaration of Independence that identified the values and principles that we believe in here and then structure everything after. If you haven't read the United States Declaration of Independence, read it. It will speak to you. I guarantee it. We didn't do that. The people that wanted to govern us, that benefited off the hard work that we do here in Alberta and Saskatchewan and British Columbia and the rest of Canada, they wrote a system. They wrote a set of laws. They wrote an act. And they passed it in British Parliament. And then they imposed it on us. So in a way, we consented through the acceptance of it. And many people celebrated, yay, we're self-governing, yay, we're our own country, but still remaining subjects. Now, in Eastern Canada, it's generally been okay that was the case because that was Canada, Ontario and Quebec, and Upper and Lower Canada. That was Canada. The West was always something different. We were always apart from the rest of the Dominion in that we were the milch cow. Have you ever seen that? The Great Canadian Milch Cow, German for milk. There's a picture of a cow, and it's eating in Alberta, and Saskatchewan and Alberta, people are feeding the cow, and the East is milking the cow and taking the benefits. And I'm telling you, that cartoon, I think it was drawn in like 1911 or something like that, and published in 1913. And it was a long time ago. But that was just shortly after Alberta was legislated into existence. So this isn't a new thing. And it's not even a thing that we Albertans and people in Saskatchewan, well, at that time, residents of the Northwest Territories, it's not something that they should have been surprised about, because they would have heard or read in the newspapers back then that in 1903, Clifford Sifton, the Minister of the Interior, came to Winnipeg and he delivered a speech on the steps of the legislature. And he said, we desire, and every patriotic Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairies go to build up our factories and workshops in the East and contribute to our prosperity in every way, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But the idea was, we want Alberta and Saskatchewan to be part of Canada, rather than being absorbed by the United States, which was going to happen. It was inevitable back then, and Shane kind of laid out a little bit of that. They didn't say, we want you to come unify with us and work towards a sovereign Canada and all be united and all prosper. No, we want your stuff. That's what it was. And if you look at the history of Alberta and Saskatchewan, since we were brought into Confederation through an act of Parliament, by the way, not through a referendum, not through a plebiscite, no First Nations consult, none of that stuff, just Ottawa passing it, signing it, and here we are part of Federation. The laws that we exist under through our consent through silence have historically been, I don't want to say anti-Alberta, but certainly not pro-Alberta prosperity, right? We've seen this. We've felt it. Some people in this room are old enough to remember what it felt like to have to bring your grain to the elevator, to the wheat board, and know that you're going to get hosed. Some of you remember what it felt like to have to pay the transportation charges, and then what you got back was like not good. Some of you might remember what it felt like in 2000 and, what year was that? I guess 2013 or something like that, when federal policies culminated in Alberta losing 100,000 jobs. Like, we felt these things. I left the oil patch because I was tired of federal policy interfering with my career. I love that job. It was a great job. But I thought, you know what? I'm tired of this boom and bust. I'm just going to buy a restaurant so the government leaves me alone and I can be under the radar. I'm not even kidding you. That was July 2019. And lo and behold, if the government didn't jam their fingers in my eye socket, unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life in 2020. It was a blessing, though, by the way. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have started learning these things and knowing who I am in Canada and what my rights are and what it means to be Canadian, even if that's expressing my desire to create something new in Alberta. And that is my opinion and my position, by the way. My position is that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. And I'm not going to tell you that that's what you should think, but I'm going to share my opinion with you. I'll back it up with as much facts as I can in the short amount of time we have. And then I want you folks to talk to me about it. I want you to ask me questions or challenge my ideas. Because what I've learned and what I've seen are what put me up here instead of spending time with my family. Now, what I've heard and what I've seen, I can't unhear it and I can't unsee it. And I know that there's a change that millions of people across the world have already reached out and grabbed. This is on the horizon for Alberta. It's a possibility. And the future that I see for Alberta and Albertans, if we're finally in real control of our wealth and resources, making the decisions, responsible for the governance, we reap the benefits of when we're doing good, or we suffer the consequences of when we pass bad laws, things will get better. They inevitably do. When you are responsible for your own decisions and you feel the effects of those decisions, do you continue to make bad? Oh, wait a minute. I've been married twice. Generally, most people with common sense stop making the bad decisions when they feel the bad effects from it, correct? If we vote for things that are anti-human, anti-prosperity, and we feel the results in high grocery bills and high fuel prices and those types of things, we generally try and do better. That's what Alberta has the opportunity to do for the first time in our history. Start making those decisions. And this isn't anything new. 100 years ago, there was roughly 50 countries on the planet. Today, there's 183. Historically, countries and regions get smaller. Why? Because people are not all the same. Alberta's values, Alberta's principles, Alberta's culture isn't directly compatible with Ontario or Quebec. Quebec, they ask government, what can you do for me? Alberta says, government, get out of my way so I can do for me, right? That's true. And I'm not faulting Quebec for it. If they want to live under that type of governance and socialist structure, that's fine, they can. I'm saying that the reason we have more countries today than we did 100 years ago is because as people grow and people change and society changes, we don't always change together. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, what is the valve that's going to release the pressure and the division caused by trying to be governed under the same rules that don't benefit both of us? you have to ask that question and be willing to talk about it. And if you don't, you're going to end up in an unhappy relationship until something eventually goes, and it will. This is nothing new, by the way. Since 1990, there's been 38 new countries. Did you know that? Since 1990. That's not a long period of time, really, in the grand scheme of things. 80% of the time that those new nations formed since 1990, 80% was with a vote and debate and talking about it. How amazing is that? 20% was with bloodshed and war. And prior to 1990, those other countries that were formed, it was a much higher instance of pain and suffering that had to be gone through to get the opportunity for self-determination. That's why Let's Talk Alberta exists. A very intelligent young man once said to thousands of people that came to challenge his ideas that when people stop talking to each other, bad things happen. Now, what I've witnessed in Alberta is the classic, we don't agree with you, shut up. The classic, we don't agree with that group, so we're going to phone the venue and tell them we're never going to support the business if we let them talk. I reject that idea completely. Whether it's allowing people who believe that the status quo is best to talk, or the people that want to change in Alberta. I think we should all have the opportunity to talk. As a matter of fact, you might find this offensive. I don't care. Please don't phone the Edmonton City Police on me. If you have something completely vile and abhorrent to say, if you're a ravaging racist and you want to say that stuff, I want you to. And I want you to say it openly and honestly, because I want to know what you're thinking. And then I'm going to challenge you on what you say. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't speak what they really believe and instead have to put on a facade and a show and pretend that there's something they're not. I don't want that. I want transparent conversations in Alberta. Because when we do that, we have the best opportunity to know where each other's coming from, find some common ground, or maybe to tell each other we're wrong. If someone comes up to me and they say a bunch of racist stuff, I'll say, you know what, that's wrong. That is incorrect. We were created by God in his image, all of us the same, with distinction and purpose. That's one of God's children, and how dare you say that about them? That's what I would say. I wouldn't say, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to talk, because then you don't have an opportunity to challenge the idea. So here we are in Grande Prairie with a big, beautiful bus outside. Did you see that? That's pretty cool, eh? Inviting people to talk about Alberta's future. I would assume that there are some people in this room that reject my notion that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. Thank you for coming. I want to hear from you. I would assume that there's some people in this room, specifically the ones that are wearing my overpriced merch, that agree with me that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. Thank you for coming. I would like to hear from both of you tonight. I hope that if you don't agree with my opinions, that you can be brave and bold and go to the microphone and ask your question or challenge what I've said. If you have a specific question about, what could happen in Alberta in the future, what might our government be? Those are important questions, of course, and I'll do my best to answer, but I want to remind everyone of one thing before you ask those questions. This isn't necessarily about exactly what Alberta is going to be. This conversation is asking, do you want, as an Albertan, to have a say in what Alberta is going to look like? When people ask me, what kind of government are we going to have? I say, what kind of government do you want? And if you don't like the government you have right now, the style of government, how are you going to change it? Or, Chris, what about our pensions in independent Alberta? What are our pensions going to look like? And I say, well, we overpay by $3 billion per year right now, as per the LifeWorks report. Are you okay with that? And if not, how are you going to change it? This is all about an opportunity. There's a lot of people out there and they're telling you, oh, you're going to pay less taxes. You're going to have personal jets and helicopters. I don't know what people are saying. They're saying all sorts of things. They're telling you this is what your constitution is going to look like. This is the kind of government we're going to have. None of those people have any idea what they're talking about. This is our opportunity collectively to decide these things. And that's amazing thing. Amazing. Think about what had to happen across history for people to be able to answer a question on self-determination. Did you know that there's some nations that formed after like decades or even hundreds of years of war before they could go and even talk about that? There are nations on this planet that got out from under the boot of communism by children smuggling pamphlets. I print off 20,000, or we print off 20,000, and we go to the post office and drop them in there to have this conversation. How lucky are we? So when people say we shouldn't be talking about this, that is the wrong idea. We should certainly be talking about this. We should be grateful that we have the blessing to be able to openly talk about things like this, because when we talk openly about our futures and how we're going to manage our futures, we will have the best outcome. If we don't talk about it, we won't. And that goes both ways, by the way. If you believe the status quo is better for me and my family and for Alberta and Albertans, I want you to convince me, because I'm human. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I would say that you have a moral obligation to convince me that I'm wrong and bring me to your side. Why? Because I'm telling you, I want Alberta and Albertans to have the best future, whether it's within or external to Canada. Right now, I have a position on this. You may have a different one. Let's talk about it. But before we do that, we're going to take a break. And Shane is waving the intimidating bucket. So as Sandy mentioned, Let's Talk Alberta is 100% grassroots funded. We don't get money from Trump. We don't get money from Putin, even though I'm Russian. I sent him a letter. He never responded. I didn't actually send him a letter. This movement is funded entirely by you folks, and in some cases, a very generous benefactor that gave us a nest egg that allowed us to kickstart. If we really want changes for our futures, we all have a little bit of sacrificing to make. I will sacrifice my time, some of my money, some of my stuff. If you can't do whatever, maybe throw 20 bucks in a bucket here or there. That's how this is done. And we really appreciate the support we've gotten so far. It blows my mind that we started in mid-January with January 18th, Shane says, with nothing but a phone call and a few $100s. And here we are months later. We've been to 80 different locations. 87. We've done 87 Let's Talk Alberta meetings. Can you believe that? And the reason we've done 87 Let's Talk Alberta meetings is because you folks have supported it. It's Albertans that are supporting the desire for the conversation around this. People who are concerned or excited about the future that we may have have been willing to put their money where their mouth is and support this. And we're seeing that not just on the the side that's more pro-independence. We're seeing this on the other side too, although nobody knows where the money's coming from, which is interesting. So let's take a... Oh, the bucket's still going around. I'm supposed to fill in the time and keep you in your seats. Does anybody know what peer pressure is? I'm going to give you a really good example of peer pressure. Peer pressure is when a bright yellow bucket comes around and you're sitting beside someone and they put like a $50 bill in and you're like, oh man, I'm going to look cheap. So then you put a $100 bill in and the person next, that's how this works. So thank you. Thank you for... Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you for exercising peer pressure in a responsible way. Patty mentioned that if you want, you can also donate via the debit machines over there or e-transfer, whatever you want to do. And I should have said this before, although I'm glad I didn't because someone probably put money in and they didn't want to. Don't feel compelled. You don't have to. These events are free, but we certainly appreciate your support. So thank you very much. We'll see you back in... Oh, Shane. Oh, we have lawn signs. We have lawn signs over there. And I think they cost us $7 or something like that. $7 or something like that. Yeah, they're by donation. Take one, take two. This is not, those lawn signs are not advocating for a specific outcome on the referendum. Those lawn signs are our idea is that the brand recognition for Let's Talk Alberta is that Albertans actually want to talk about this. We've been told for so long that this isn't a conversation anyone wants to have. This is a dangerous conversation. This isn't, it's not something you should talk about. I don't believe that's true. I think Albertans do want to talk about this, and I think we should. So those lawn signs, those t-shirts, the hats and stuff like that, that's just conversation starters that say, hey, you might disagree with me. I might disagree with you. I'm willing to talk about it. So please grab some of that stuff as well. And yeah, so now we're actually going to break for 10, probably more like 15 minutes. And when we come back, please bring your toughest questions. Otherwise, Jasper is going to make fun of me for getting easy questions all night. Thank you.
the old world.
And it's working, you see.
I just don't let them. I just mute them on demand. I don't leave them on all the time. Whatever, because if I leave all the mics on, it's gonna feedback. So what I see is that as soon as I saw speaking the mic doing like this, I unmute the channel.
Well, Chris isn't here yet either.
Same for everybody. Because if I leave the mics hot too long, because if I leave the mics hot all the time, it's going to extend the feedback.
Also, when the mics are sitting down. Max, do we want to have line up on that side? Okay. We're going to have line up again.
That's not in your face.
Yeah.
So for the Q&A section, guys, if you have questions, please line up on the section where please line up on the section where we have all the merchandise tables. You see Jasper over there with the microphone down there, with the wireless microphone. So if you have questions, just go to where he is. He's going to hold the mic, and just so you know, this is being live streamed right now. So if you have questions and you're holding on the microphone, it's going to be on your screen. If you're a little more cautious on privacy, there's an option to write the questions down on a piece of paper, and we'll go the questions as well. Also, if you have questions during the Q&A session, please keep your phones shut down, no noise, put it on mute at all times, and keep yourself quiet. And we're going to ask you to when somebody's asking questions, to not interrupt
Before we get started, I'm going to ask a couple of favors from you. The first favor is the algorithm plays havoc with our posters. So if you could go on freedomcalendar.net or letstalkalberta.com, grab a copy of the posters that are for upcoming events and share them to people that you know in the area. That would be greatly appreciated. And ask them to share it to a couple of friends. And it's what I call the shampoo method. And normally I would take my hat off, but Chris predicts that too easily. So I'm not going to do it today. Because, well, as you see, I know lots about shampoo. But it's the Clairol commercial from the 1970s and 80s. You tell two friends and they'll tell two friends and so on and so on and so on. The other thing is if you have highway frontage, or you know somebody that's got prime highway frontage, we're looking for places to put banners and signs. So let me know, or let the ladies at the back know. And I have one banner with me, but I've already promised it out for tonight. But we will make sure we'll be up here several more times. We're going to do a sign run in the next week or so up into the area. And we might not come as far north as Grande Prairie in one day run back and forth, but because we're going to try and do a loop. But if we do, we'll at least get as far as Valley View. So we might be able to meet there or leave it with somebody that you know in the Valley View area. So make sure that you leave your name and number with the ladies at the back. And now that all of us are back up at the table, we'll get started with the Q&A.
And just so you know, I'm not playing video games. I'm trying to watch the comments online so we don't miss any questions.
If you have any questions, come on over here and you can have them. We want to make those guys over there sweat, so bring your hardest questions. If you have any hesitation, if you don't want to be on the microphone, go to Sandy. she will write your question down and we will read it for, we will ask it to our panel. So if you have any hesitation, don't hesitate and go over to Sandy.
Shane, somebody on the chat says that he has frontline signage on Highway 22 near Drayton Valley. I'll come back to you after.
Perfect, thanks.
Who wants?
Whoa, it's like a stampede, okay, folks? Just not everybody all at once. One at a time, please.
I've got the first one
No,
here,
don't
I guess.
step on him. Oh.
I can't
My
see
name is
from here.
Warren. I just have a question. Has anybody ever came and had a legit reason to stay and talk to you about it? Nobody ever does.
Well, yes, I have heard people convey legitimate concerns they have about Alberta not being part of Canada. For me, what I found is when we start to have a conversation about that issue, I generally turn that into a reason why Alberta should consider becoming independent. The most legitimate opposition to Alberta independence is based on patriotism, to an emotional attachment to what they believe Canada is now. And it's generally what they knew Canada was a while ago. Like I tell a story about my grade 4 teacher, Mr. Ruda. May he rest in peace. I think we may have had a hand in that. I'll be 47 on September 7th, right away here. So you guys have some shopping days left. Don't forget. And that means I started elementary school kind of mid 80s-ish. Now, in the mid 80s, that was like right on the heels of the repatriation of the Constitution, right? And that was a big deal for a lot of people, especially my grade 4 teacher, Mr. Ruda. When he was teaching us about Canada and what the Constitution meant, what the Charter of Freedoms, Charter of Rights and Freedoms meant, that man's face would light up and his eyes were like twinkling. He was so proud of what Canada was and what we had accomplished. And I remember knowing that Canada was a free country, and I was so grateful to live in a free country. It was always going to be like that. And Mr. Ruda if I could picture anything that could capture the feeling of what Canada was, it's him. And I felt that for most of my life, even up until I became an Albertan when I came home to Alberta. Knowing that Alberta was kind of starting to carry the country, knowing that we were being overtaxed, underrepresented, I still felt that way. I started to change the way I felt when I was sitting in jail for protesting. That changes you. All of a sudden, the notion that Canada's a free country always will be starts to feel differently when you're laying on concrete because you exercised your charter right to protest. I didn't go to jail because I served hamburgers or because I broke AHS's rules. I went to jail because I protested. I protested what the government was doing on my own property peacefully. So I started to feel differently. And then as I watched some people who I'd got to know go through similar and way worse things, specifically, the guys in Coots, the way I felt about the freedoms that I knew we had when I was 8 years old was not there anymore. And many people in Alberta and in Canada, they may not have ever experienced something like that. I hope they don't have to. Unless you do, or you've heard the story and you're sympathetic to the person that's telling the story, you might just, that emotional connection, that patriotism might blind you to the failings of your nation. So I'm not telling you this to tell you that it's not a reason. It is a legitimate reason why somebody would want to stay in Confederation. But for me, I find that when you start explaining why you no longer share that same opinion, now it's the human connection that takes over. And it's that human connection that can break the blinding veil of patriotism, right? So that's really the only one that I've found that's a argument specifically against.
And if you have that, just hand them the Alberta Act, because that's what did it for me. I was 13 years of age and read the Alberta Act, and I knew at that moment in time Alberta was not sustainable as a province, and that's why I encourage everybody to read the Alberta Act.
One argument that I heard for remaining in Canada took me a little while to think about was if we divided, we would be weaker against foreign adversaries such as Russia or China. And my thoughts on that is we already are being infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party. There's been reports by Canadian intelligence services on this. Either way, we are having to face a foreign adversary whether Alberta leaves or Alberta stays. And if Alberta left, we could remain a part of NATO, for example. We can still have alliances with other countries for our defense against foreign adversaries. And I think regardless of if we leave or remain, we need to continue to hold our leaders accountable. There's MLAs, there's MPs that have non-disclosure agreements where they're not allowed to say who is bought and paid for by the Chinese Communist Party. So whether we leave or not is not necessarily the problem. It's that, again, we're not getting involved enough in our democracy.
One thing that freaks me out is, as an Albertan, how do you feel that our federal government is trying to make an adversary out of our best trading partner and closest neighbor? How do you feel about that? That is absolutely ludicrous to me. We do 80% of our trade, in some cases up to 90% of some things with the United States. And our federal government is picking a fight with them and basically saying, we're going to elbows up and destroy America? Like, or seriously? That's creating an adversary with someone that, a nation that we should not be adversarial with. And as an Albertan, you know, we know that we can't really affect the way the federal government is handling that, but we could affect it if it was our deal. But I'm going to give you a technical one because there is, if I'm going to be honest, which I try to be, the one argument I've heard that has the most weight behind it is, what about the disruption that's going to happen in trade? And there will be some disruption in the beginning. It won't be, everything's not always going to be roses, right? So business, there might be some instability. We might have some trade disruption, of course. But these are all manageable things. And they're things that if you start planning ahead and you have these conversations, like say, for instance, you talk to your largest trading partner and say, hey, you know, if we pursue self-determination, would you guys support that? And then you start talking about it. Then you minimize the impacts, but there will be impacts, of course.
Well, add to the fact that they're going after our biggest trading partner. Take the fact that he's now making one of our biggest adversaries in the Western and giving them preferred nation status. Add that to it, and it really brings a sobering thought.
Hi. So I came here tonight because I know some people that are very pro Alberta separation. I can't say that I'm pro, but I also can't say that I'm against it. I feel like basically I just don't know enough. So that's why I came here, because I don't know enough. And I really enjoyed the speeches. I learned a lot. There was something that stood out to me in what Emmett had to say. I thought it was quite funny and very aptly spoken, where you said, you know, I don't think that it makes a lot of sense for me to ask my girlfriend if I can ask to break up with her, right? And that's exactly the thought that I've had about the referendum. I think, isn't it basically that? And because I don't really see anyone talking about what actually happens practically if Ottawa just says no. So if Ottawa just says no, do we just go, okay, well, never mind then? Or you know, like what happens if Ottawa says no? And okay, and so I just want to also say that I do have two other questions, and so I just wanted to ask if you would prefer if I just ask them all at once or just one at a time.
Well, let's deal with that first one,
okay, yeah.
because that's a really important one. The question is, what happens if Alberta, we say we want to be our own nation, and we start in the negotiation with Ottawa, and they say no? Well, my comment is, we're not asking. When you if you're talking about becoming sovereign, you don't ask for that. That's something you take. Now, the Clarity Act is Canada's preference. That's the Supreme Court's preference on how a province may pursue sovereignty. Okay, but in no reality does the nation that people want to leave dictate the terms on how they do it. Like that's not a thing. When if a region or a province decides they want to self-determine, that's their right. That's an internationally accepted right to self-determination. And even Canada respects that. Canada was among the first or maybe second to recognize Kosovo when Kosovo declared independence and exercised their sovereignty. Now, Kosovo's conditions, it was a little bit odd, and it wasn't all on the up and up, but Canada still recognized their self-determination. Our own Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has recognized the sovereign state of Palestine, right? So Canada has historically recognized the pursuit of self-determination for a people, and I don't think that it would be any different with Alberta. And if it was, it doesn't really matter. There's only two things that are needed for independence, and that is the will of the people, as shown in a successful referendum on Alberta independence with a clear question and clear answer, and international recognition. Aside from that, it's not up to Ottawa, and they don't get to say yes or no.
In fact, the Clarity Act actually says that. Clarity Act actually says if they do not negotiate in good faith, you can do exactly what Chris just said at the very end, that you have the right to unilaterally declare independence. And as soon as you're recognized by two other nations, you're good to go.
All right, well, that does kind of answer my second question, because I was going to ask, well, then if Ottawa said no and we're going, okay, well, I mean, you don't really get to say no. Wouldn't that be a declaration of civil war, essentially? I guess based on what you said, that answers that question, because it's like, well, if Canada has historically honored the right of nations to self-determination, then they wouldn't want to tarnish their image of being all tolerant, peaceful in that way. So it wouldn't be good PR for them to just go to war with us. Okay, and then I guess my final question would be that, do you think that enough Albertans are of the same kind of mettle as people of the past? And what I mean by that is, I really I loved what a lot of what you all insinuated in your speeches about responsibility, how rights and responsibilities are two sides of the same coin. That outcomes should be based on merit, not from this weird need to try and enact cosmic justice. Totally agree, and I think a lot of Albertans are in good company with you on that. But I wonder if enough people would really take those beliefs to their furthest logical conclusion in actual practice. So, for instance, I have a friend who is in favor of separation, but he lives off the government and he doesn't take responsibility for things like with his health. And so I'm going, okay, you say you want these things, but you're living the kind of life that depends on all these layers of social safety nets. And so, yeah, do you just really think enough Albertans are of that mind where they would actually be willing to give up a lot of these things? You could call them comforts, you can call them safety nets, whatever you want to call them, just for freedom, essentially.
So I'll tie this back in with something you had mentioned earlier, which was about the question to have a question. And also this ties into something that Jason Kenney was talking about in his recent debate, that Albertans do want a safety net. So Albertans currently, affordability is going down, times are getting tougher, and people are afraid of what's going to happen. That's just a natural behavior, right? And I think because we're having a question, and if we can have a question, that buys time for people to consider the consequences and get more invested or more divested, however this plays out. And one argument for independence is that Alberta generates a higher GDP per capita than the rest of Canada. So just based off of that math, if Alberta left Canada, there'd be more wealth per person. If there's more wealth per person, there's more money that can be put towards a social safety net. So if a person wants their social safety net, and we have our say that we do want more of a safety net, there'll be more money to go around per capita in an independent Alberta to fund that. So it does give us a lot more freedom either way. So there's those things that they can consider, whether they decide to vote to leave or remain. And again, circling back to our question to have a question, we're buying time for people to discuss this and become more confident by the time we get to an actually binding one. This is a big decision, and everyone wants to make sure it's done right.
And nobody wants to see anybody left behind either, right? So here's what I'll say about, do I believe that there's enough people that will take responsibility and do the work? After what I've seen in the last 5 years, yes, absolutely. I have seen people step up and do what needs to be done in ways that I never would have considered. Like whether it's getting involved in politics or standing and protesting or going to jail for what they believe in. I have seen some pretty incredible people in the last while, and I have no reservations that there's not enough people to do the work and build what needs to be built.
I got another thing I could add while we're waiting for another speaker. So I've been helping out a private charity recently. And one of the top reasons I've heard from people that don't want to donate to a charity is that the government has already taken most of their disposable income through taxes. So there can be a safety net through a public approach where the government takes your money via taxes and has their own social programs. But then there's also the private charity route. So whether we go for a route that's invisible hand or government regulated, either way, no one wants to leave anyone behind. And an independent Alberta will have greater abundance to fund it through the private or the public way.
And on that note, I'm actually tired of watching government gaslight people and tell them, oh, we're doing this to help you, and then watching their friends get rich off of the help they're giving us. Like, that's not charity. Being compelled to give up 50% of the value that you create by exchanging the hours and days and minutes of your lives for money, and then the government turning around and using that to enrich their friends and help a few people, that's not charity. It's something else. I don't know what the word is, but the word, yeah, there you go. Crony capitalism, theft comes to mind. I think we can do much, much better than that system.
What do you think Carney offered Smith?
That's a legit question. I don't believe there's any big conspiracy where people are getting paid off to do this. I put these thoughts together in a booklet back there called Why Politicians Love the Status Quo. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. My theory is that in provincial politics in Alberta, number one, we don't pay our MLAs enough. Sorry, some of you don't agree with me. I think that the people that are running our hundreds of billions of dollar corporation of Alberta should probably be paid more, and they don't get a pension. So when we have provincial politicians, there's always this looming golden claw of federal politics that's just waiting to scoop them up and bring them to Ottawa to do something else, where they get way more money and they get a pension and they get more expense stuff. And it's a lavish reward kind of thing for keeping peace, order, and good governance in Canada. So I don't think that they have to offer anything more than the system already offers. The system that we have encourages our provincial politicians to sacrifice what's best for Alberta and promote unified Canada so that later on it benefits them more. And I don't say that, that sounds really damning, but I'm not trying to say that maybe they don't believe that what they're doing is the best thing, but I am old enough and wise enough to know that people generally subconsciously will do the things that make sure that they are taken care of first, even if they truly believe it's the best thing for everyone else. I don't think our politicians are any different. So if you want to know more about that, pick up a copy of this, Why Our Politicians Love the Status Quo. I was on an interview or the Rebel Roundup or the Buffalo Roundtable this morning with Sheila Gunn Reid and Lees and Stockwell Day. And my final comment was, yeah, pick up my booklet on why our politicians love the status quo, because Stockwell, he's a federalist. He wants Alberta to stay. And so that was, I didn't realize that I was taking a dig until after, but that sums it up in there.
My name is Pat, and thank you for coming. Oh, can't hear me? Okay. My question is about the Crown. I've not heard how that works. Do they have any say, or are we not under the Crown anymore? Thank you.
As per the Clarity Act, the Crown has no say in it. And if we were smart, we would do exactly what Quebec had done in advance. And you know what Quebec did? When the King came over to open Parliament, they had a meeting of their legislature. They voted unanimously to do away with the Crown. All parties, the whole legislature voted to do away with the Crown. Then they couriered a declaration to the King in Ottawa, and it was delivered just as he came down from giving the throne speech. Then they turned around and they put a for sale sign on the Lieutenant Governor's mansion. So we need to follow the lead. We've been always told that from the time that I was a kid, Quebec is the enemy. Quebec is the enemy. No, they need to be our teachers. You know that they have used the notwithstanding clause almost 1,600 times since the new Constitution, and they didn't even sign the new Constitution, but they sure picked up on the fact that they could use the notwithstanding clause. And they've used it over 1,600 times since then. And they do it on every federal bill. The Clarity Act itself, as soon as the government came out with that, they said, we're not following it. And they used the notwithstanding clause on it. They have been, everybody knows about the French language law. They are now on their 5th time to court, because since they enacted it in 1980, the federal government has taken them to court. The Supreme Court rules it's unconstitutional. They say, okay, they change a few words in it. Back it comes into place. Federal government has to take them to court again. They do not even let it have a heartbeat in between the Supreme Court's ruling and the changes that are enacted, and out it comes again. We need to be following. They are the only province that is actually sovereign within a united Canada.
Yeah, touching a bit more on Crown. So when I think of the word Crown, I think of public or government land. And there's been discussion on if Alberta leaves, what's happening to Crown land. Well, there's Crown in the right of England, which transferred to Canada when Canada became independent from England. And then Crown land became Crown in the right of Canada. And then there's Crown in the right of Alberta, which is Alberta's public land ownership. So if there was a independence referendum that passed, the Crown in the right of Canada could transition to Crown in the right of Alberta. And that also ties in with the indigenous negotiations. The Crown land that's being discussed, the ownership of it can transfer from the right of Canada to the right of Alberta and still be considered Crown land. if we decided to not follow a route towards a republic. That's my 2 cents.
But I'm going to add to that then that that was all done. The federal crown land was all done away with in 1931 because the Statute of Westminster is very clear that all provincial land is been transferred, the land and resources, to the people in care of the province. And that means there is no federal land. So it's easy to get rid of the crown. The crown already gave it up to the people in the Statute of Westminster.
Hi, I'm Lucille and I identify as a conservative redneck grandma. And my question is something that I have ongoing with my grandson who wants to stay in Canada. I don't know, he says that Alberta, the money coming into Alberta from companies is going to decrease because of our instability. But I tell him it's going to get stronger because we will have less regulations from Ottawa. So can you tell me what I might be able to say to him?
That is a fantastic question. What about all of the money that's going to leave Alberta because Alberta's becoming independent? What about the $150 billion of investment capital that's fled Alberta under 20 years of Liberal government? And what have we been able to do about it? It isn't talk of self-determination that causes companies to flee. It's policy uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty. And we've experienced, if anyone knows, it's Alberta. Canada's biggest flagship energy company in Canada left and went to Texas, right? So it's not talk of self-determination that causes investment to flee. It is political, it's legislative uncertainty, which we've been subject to. Another thing that comes up frequently is, well, what about the Quebec referendum? What about all of the businesses that left Quebec because they were talking about becoming independent? That is a common misconception. It wasn't independence or Quebec independence that caused businesses to leave. It was legislative uncertainty. Quebec imposed the language laws that Shane mentioned. And a lot of these companies, they had to look and say, well, it's going to cost us millions to change our operations in Quebec or Montreal to French. It's cheaper to go to Toronto. And they did. It wasn't anything to do with self-determination. On the contrary, if you look at what Alberta could do, and Alberta has always been open for business, except for a little period between 2020 and 2023, but that's a different story. We were the world leader in attracting corporations. We were the #1 destination for a corporation in the world for quite some time, and we could get back to that place. So if when you have that conversation with your grandson, just let him know how it's gone so far, and we haven't been able to do anything about it. $150 billion, that is a big chunk of change. That's a lot of jobs. That's millions and millions of jobs that we've lost because we've been unable to deal with that policy.
And to add to that, there's been several economists, not Canadian, unfortunately, but Brooks Institute was one of them, that did calculations, and they figured that within 10 to 15 years, Alberta could have the 6th largest economy in the world. But that none of that's guaranteed, but the numbers are there to support it. So that's another argument right there on that one.
The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers recently sent an open letter to the federal government explaining how their policies were being disastrous to the oil sector. And that just shows that the federal government is making bad policy for Alberta. And if Alberta were to separate, it would be within our domain to establish policy that's effective for businesses. So we would take control of our successes or failures rather than leaving it up to Ottawa to make those decisions.
A quick group exercise. How many people in this room would prefer, if Alberta was an independent nation, to pursue climate alarmism related policies that kneecapped our industry and reduced our prosperity? Raise your hand. How many people in this room would want Alberta to have policies based on human flourishing, responsible environmental management, and prosperity? How do you think it's going to go in an independent Alberta when it's Albertans making these decisions?
I've got two things, Chris. First, can you lift up your head?
Yet I have gray hair.
And the second thing, because I saw some beef coming up. And the second thing is I don't see any sweat. So if you bring your hardest question, that's what we're asking. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Brett, and I was wondering about the WEF. Are they going to have an influence on us in Alberta here?
No, F those guys.
I got another question here. Let's see here about the natives here. What's the story on the natives? I keep seeing it all the time. I'm just wondering about that.
Well, that's a good question. And there's a question online that's similar. So I'll read it right now if you don't mind. It says, here's a question. What about First Nations which have land in Alberta? They might not be amicable or they might refuse to separate. What is their stance, etc.? Their territorial land might be crossing over, etc. Okay, so there's an interesting poll that was done a couple months ago, and it was done by Main Street, I believe, which is, it's not a pollster that's in our favor. And their poll uncovered that 46% of First Nations polled agreed that Alberta independence, or they would prefer a change, Alberta independence. So that's one thing. This question online about territories. So if you bother to read the treaties, which most people haven't, and they're very short, you can actually, I think, do we have the booklets there? Are they there? I think there's a couple booklets there. I wrote another thing specifically. Okay, we don't have that one. We just have the trifold. The treaties outline some things. What territory is being ceded for now and forever? What things are given in exchange for this? Now, I've heard an argument, oh, they didn't understand what they were saying. They were just meant to share the land. Do you know how many signatories there were on each treaties and how many signatories to the adhesions there were? Dozens. This was not just one person saying, oh, we're going to do this. This was a group of people that were doing what they felt was the best thing to do for their people to make sure that they could sustain and move forward into a future that was changing. That's the truth. That's why in the treaties, they specifically, some of it was adhesions, they specifically asked for schools, they asked for medicine, they asked for implements, and they asked for help in adapting to what the world is becoming, okay? So the idea that because there's territory in which the signatories agreed to allow traditional hunting, fishing, gathering, and those types of things would trump the wrong word to use, would overrule the other 93% of Albertans is ludicrous. And the other question that you have to ask when you talk about, well, what about First Nations, what about treaty land, is how well has the status quo treated our First Nations brothers and sisters to this point, right? If anybody stands to benefit from Alberta changing or leaving the status quo, doing something different, it's our First Nations people here in Alberta. So that's something that we should consider.
One thing I would like to point out from that survey is 41% are hard set on staying in Canada, but that leaves 13% undecided.
My other question was with England. They were saying, is it England still an influence on us here? Because I hear about England.
I don't really think so. No.
Last question. Okay. Sorry here. The bills that are passed, are they going to be like brought over to us, that are being passed now, or are we gonna abolish those bills that are coming to us, that you guys we were just talking about?
Well, an independent nation of Alberta would not we would choose what we could continue. So I would say, my opinion is that day one, nothing really changes. We still have the same laws, structures, whatever. Then we start changing things the way we want them, right? But would an independent Alberta continue with the legislation that specifically kneecaps our industry? No, I don't think so. But maybe they would. Maybe by that point, the majority of Albertans would believe that we should legislate ourselves into poverty. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I don't think it would happen, but it could.
I doubt very much that the majority of Albertans would want to bring our own version of Bill C-9 into being.
My name is Fritz, and thank you guys for coming. Long story short, the WEF has been infiltrated since 1971. Like, we got 55 years of those kind of people telling our politicians what to do. If it isn't CO2 tax or whatever we got coming. When Carney said in January of 2026 in China about the New World Order, I think everybody in this room has to ask if we want to be part of that or we don't. And if we're going to stay in Canada, then we have to take the consequences to our kids and grandkids and find out what CBDC does, the ESG, CADG, Sustainable Development Goals, and find out what's coming to us, because that's what the New World Order is all about, unless I see that wrong. What's your take on the New World Order to be part of that?
Well, first of all, I just realized that the New World Order is actually an invasion of acronyms. Like, literally, there's all of these things that are being pushed on us, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever, an artist formerly known as Prince. Like, it's absolutely insane. I don't want to pursue a future where our children live under state control and complete control by government. I don't. And the WEF, at their core, they believe that we're useless eaters and that we need to be managed like farm animals. And you call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but look at some of the policy that's coming out of Davis. That's the type of stuff. It's like, no, you have to get in this box. We'll tell you what you can eat some bugs. We'll tell you where you can live. Don't live in rural anymore. We're pushing you into 15-minute cities. We're going to tell you what you drive. Jasper, sorry, you can't drive your car in Amsterdam anymore. We're going to tell you who you can associate with. Like, there is a serious potential for like total government control, and it's right on our doorstep. We started talking about this 20 years ago. On Facebook, there's these posts circulating about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the list of sustainable, unsustainable things. And people were like, this is so crazy, it could never happen. Some of the unsustainable things were the family unit, culture, whiteness, religion. Like, these are things that are considered unsustainable. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Now, when you look at what Canada's doing and some of the policy we're adopting, did we ever ask the government to enact policy that put 30% or would potentially put 30% of our farmland back to nature? Did we ask for that? No, we didn't. We never asked for these policies. And yet here they are somehow making their way into our legislature. And it's exactly what you said. Our politicians are going overseas to these fancy places, and they're all cool in their little meetings, how they're going to save the world. And then they come back with talking points that we didn't ask for. And as an Albertan, every time I see something coming from the federal government, like Bill C-9, for instance, that would further government control, I start wanting to work even harder, because that's the future we're going to get. Imagine a future where you weren't even allowed to come up on a stage like this and speak your mind about what you believe that the future should be in your democracy. If you can't speak, you don't have a democracy, and that's on our doorstep. So that's a very good point. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Our politicians are openly admitting that they're working with others to usher in the New World Order, and I, as an Albertan and a father, will not stand for it.
All you have to do is go to their website, and they'll tell you that. They don't even try and hide it. They have it all laid out on their website. And one thing you forgot to mention is their goal that by 2055, they want to have the population of the planet down to 1 billion people or less. That means that they want to kill off 7 billion or 6 billion people.
Well, I don't think they want to kill off people,
No,
Shane.
they want to do it through birth
I think they
rate.
want to attack the family unit, kill babies, kill the elderly, and
That's
make
still
it so
killing
that
people off.
children, well, yeah, you're right. Children don't want to have families anymore. How many people in this room know kids that are getting to the age where they should start thinking about families and they don't want to bring kids into the world because of the shape it's in? They're doing it already.
Colonialism never went away, and it's never going to go away. There's always going to be some form of elite that wants to exploit a body of people, whether it's England or France exploiting Africa, or whether it's Ottawa exploiting Alberta. If Albertans want their freedom, they're going to have to get involved and stay involved if they want to keep their freedom, keep their economic mobility intact. I think of Gaddafi. Can't remember if he was the leader of Algeria or Libya, but he tried to he tried to gain more sovereignty for his country, more independence from organizations like the WEF, more self-reliance. And he was ousted. And then that country went back into chaos and became exploited once again by foreign powers. It's going to get tough if we want to maintain our freedoms and our economic mobility within our domain. And there's going to be pressures no matter what, whether we leave or remain. And that is why we need to get involved and stay involved in our political systems.
My name is Tanya, and I want to go back to the first question that was asked. You say that we have enough people to possibly become an independent Alberta. When we had the signatures, we were supposed to get 169,000, and we were on our way to having this referendum. We got 300, we only got 300,000 signatures, which I thought was really low. So what are you going to say is enough for the amount of people that have to get behind this for it to happen?
Well, I mean, democracy is 50% plus one. I wasn't actually surprised to see the low number of signatures compelling the government to put the referendum question to the people. I wasn't surprised at all. And the reason for that is, number one, and it's not an excuse, but it contributes. That was done during like the most miserable time of Alberta's seasons, right? That was not easy. People were standing out freezing in the cold. Again, I believe that people should be more committed and be willing to get over that for something this important. But there's another really crazy thing that you might not even believe. We have people in Alberta, for good reason, who actually were concerned that if they put their name on a piece of paper, that their government would persecute or prosecute them. Can you believe it? In Canada, we have a very large number of people. Some people are estimating like probably maybe 50% or 1 in 3 wouldn't sign because they were scared of getting their bank accounts frozen. The government would never do that to us, would they? This is not an easy conversation to have. Even let's look at the Forever Canadian petition, because they were asking for a referendum as well. It said right on the form, only 400,000 signed that. Why is that? That's the status quo. That's comfort, right? Not changing anything. That's the easy path. Even though it might be harder in the end, it's easy to say, oh, I just want things to stay the same. It's not so bad. You don't have to stick your head out or your neck out or whatever. Why did only 400,000? But what really was exciting about that whole process was I was watching who was coming out. I was watching entire families standing in lines for 3 hours with, 4 kids voting age, young kids standing there waiting to sign to compel the government to put the question to the people. So I'm less concerned with the total number because I understand that it wasn't a private thing. People were there taking pictures and posting it on the internet, and there was a lot of back and forth attacks. But the ballot and a referendum, that's between you and the piece of paper. Your wife isn't there. Your family's not there. It's you and what you know and what you believe and a piece of paper and your democratic will. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who will put the X on a specific box in that case because it's what they believe. They just can't share it publicly. And I don't blame them for not sharing it publicly. It's not an easy conversation sometimes.
And there were people during the petition phase that were going online and saying that if they found out that any of their family members or anything, they were going after them. So it was a big commitment for some people to have to do. I mean, companies were actually even saying if they found out their employees that signed it, they would fire them. And that's not protected speech. In Canada, that's not protected speech. So there was nothing that you could do against your employer about it. They just have to. Here in Alberta, you want to fire somebody, you don't have to give them a reason. So, yeah, exactly. So I think that that there is the numbers, because you look at the one question we already have had as a referendum question, and that is, do we want equalization? And that was 61.5% of the people said no. I think our numbers are going to be up near that in the end, because the same people that we didn't get rid of equalization. So I think our numbers are going to be up there on wanting an independent Alberta too in the end.
And aside from the numbers, regardless of what side of the conversation you're on, if you have the conversation and you're whatever's making you anxious or fearful of a decision, if you talk to people, sometimes that disappears. For instance, we have a lot of people that come to these events and they ask me, Chris, what's going to happen to my pension? I need my pension. And I explain how the pension works as a portability clause. You could live anywhere in the world and you still get your pension, those types of things. And then like, oh, okay, well, I guess now I can vote the way I want. But they were told by somebody, have you seen this in the news? If Alberta becomes independent, you'll lose your pension, you'll lose your citizenship, you'll lose your passport, you won't be able to travel in Canada. Have you seen that in the news? Yes. Those are all, do you know those are all lies? Those are all demonstrably false statements. And yet people have been told that, and it's making them fearful. So if we have the conversations with them, you don't even have to tell them, you don't have to say, hey, vote this way. You have the conversation and say, what are your reservations one way or another? And then tell them that information and let them make up their own mind. That's the beauty of conversation, is you don't have to tell them what to think. You just give them the information, they can make the choice themselves.
So I'm always amazed that people are saying if you don't, because I'm not from Canada, I'm not from Alberta, I'm an independent journalist from Holland, that people are showing up in town halls and meetings like this. So this is a bit of your culture, so now let nobody tell you that there's any culture in here. But Let's Talk Alberta has almost 20 speakers, and we're doing this with 100, 200 volunteers. Every time we're coming up, there are volunteers here, and we're traveling with a couple of them. Patty is here with an anonymous question from the audience. Patty, go.
So this question is for the crowd. How many people here have children or grandchildren? And where are they now? I think he's saying that there's not a lot of youngsters here. What can we do to involve young people to engage with politics and learn their rights before it's too late?
So I guess the question is, why don't the children on your school don't get education?
Well, I'm gonna tell you that they may not show up in rooms like this, but they sure showed up for the petition. They showed up in droves for the petition. They lined up. They outnumbered the elderly. I call myself the elderly, so us older folks, by the young families and like. A lot of times the younger people that are at home putting the kids to bed and like they just aren't coming to this type of meeting. But when it counted, they showed up in droves. So I don't think we actually have to worry about the younger generation. I think they're out there. And we have a couple here. I can see a couple, but those that don't, it's because they're working, they're putting their kids to bed. There's something that they're doing, but when it counts, they're there.
I'm at a point where a lot of the young people are. They're watching
Online.
from online, so they might not be present here, but they are still aware of what's going on. And it's up to them if they decide to take action or not. Personally, I didn't realize I needed to take action until I saw the Freedom Convoy and the consequences doing nothing. And ultimately, I can't control what another person decides to do, but we can each have conversations with those we do know, and that's how we can reach the youth. I think we need to talk to everyone we know to identify who's in favor of something, who's against something, and who's on the fence. Yeah, that too. We also have a lot of more youth in this crowd, actually, Shane's pointing out. But if we're able to identify the people we know and where they sit, then we can talk to the undecideds to get them to decide one way or the other. I can't take a side because it's Let's Talk Alberta here. But the way that we reach the youth is just to engage with everyone we know and encourage them to engage with everyone they know, and et cetera, et cetera. We'll branch out through our degrees of separation to reach the youth, the elderly, everyone.
So that's why we're having 2 live streams over there in front of you. You see Max sitting from freedomcalendar.net, and of course Chris is live streaming on his pages. And everybody who's watching this online, please share, like, and comment on this stream so everybody and more people can see this.
I'm Glenn Kelly. I am commenting on the stretch of the King Charles influence within our Canadian environment. Currently, the province of BC is paying stumpage to King Charles. He is there. The little tidbits that we're still feeding the British common, sort of the British, Britain or whatever they want to call it. But yes, we do still have those influences that take place within Canada that it's going offshore. It's going because of the arrangements that have been made through the years with the Commonwealth, or with, coming out of the Great Britain type of thing.
So I didn't know that. Now, are you meaning that it's directly going to England, or is it like the Crown and right of British Columbia?
My understanding is it's going right to England.
Okay, I had thought it was something else, but I'm gonna check that. Yeah.
Please do. Just because I can't remember the circumstances that I heard of it, but it did come from sort of that part. But again, it's there.
Yeah. Why should Canadians be sending the value that we create to? We shouldn't. We should be using it to feed our own people.
Going with that, you've also got every time that the King appears in Canada, he receives a beaver. There's the pelt, and there's 2 things that receive, because that is what Canada has to do when he comes into our country. There are certain things that are sort of, it's part of the process.
There's a great off-color joke there, but I'm told I'm not allowed to do that anymore. Sorry.
Hi there, my name is Leif Anderson. I've got 2 questions for the board, but first I'd like to thank you very much for coming up here to have this evening and to have this opportunity to have discussion. What do you say to family members, friends, co-workers who turn away and don't want to have the discussion? When you bring up the topic, we'll use Let's Talk Alberta, and they shut you down before the words even finish coming out of your mouth. I'll leave it at my first question, and then I'll ask my second question.
In the words of the great Corey Morgan, you walk away. Because is that relationship, you got to decide, is that if they are that opposed to it, do you want to lose the relationship? And if you don't want to lose the relationship, you walk away, because they're not going to change their mind if they're that adamant, and all you're going to do is drive a wedge between you and them. You can leave information around. If they want to read it, they'll read it, but to directly go after them, it's not worth losing the relationship to do so.
I agree with Shane, but if it was me and one of my sisters, which it isn't, I would put Alberta stickers on their car every time they weren't looking.
Well, I was thinking, there's some great merch from a local business that would go great under a Christmas tree, but that's just a different question. Second party to that is for those of us who are, as a result, losing hope that and I don't mean this in a negative way, but are losing hope with what's going on and how long this process will take. What do you say to those people now, and what may or may not happen come October 20th, who are losing hope and are looking to get out of this lovely country called Canada?
Yes, you know what? It is going to take a little while. However, do you know how long the American Revolution was? 22 years. Do you know how long after that it took? How long till they had a constitution in place? 1776 to 1797 was when they finally put a constitution in place. So it's never a quick process. So if we have to wait an extra year because of this extra question before we get any definitive answer, it's just, it is what it is. As much as we may not like it, it's nothing compared to things like the American Revolution and like. We've still got it. We're still working on it, and the way I look at it, it's just another roadblock, and we just have to bulldoze it down.
One challenge that many people face is the hurdle of process versus outcome. People can get so outcome focused that they forget about the process required to get that outcome in the first place. I think some of us tend to worry too much about what we want to happen rather than what we can do to get us on the path to getting that to happen. So yeah, I can understand how a person might get demoralized if they think it might not go a certain way, but they can also think about what they can do to get us towards where we want to go, and at least know that they did their best. Don't get discouraged. Do the best you can.
I'll tell you why I rarely lose hope anymore, regardless of what's happening. I get the question often, what if we don't win? And take that for whatever you mean. What if we don't win? What if we don't get our way? And I can't help but think, what's the battle that we're actually in? Like, what are we actually doing? I think it's deeper than that. I think it's a good and evil thing. Now, if you reduce it to the common denominator like I do, and I'm not saying that Alberta independence would solve all those problems. I'm just saying that that's, this is where I believe the battle actually is. I don't think, I'm hopeful because I know that battle was won about 2,000 years ago on a cross. Okay? Now, you might not share my faith in that, but I believe that the battle between good and evil has already been finished. We're just in the epilogue. We're at the final chapters of this thing. Now, when I think about what I want as opposed to what I get, I went through a time when I just wanted to be in business and work hard and earn money, and I got a jail cell. Now, some people would be very upset about that, and I hear people tell me all the time, I'm very sorry you went through that, and I correct them, don't be sorry for me. The things that have happened to me in my life have all been blessings, even though it hurt sometimes. Because if I hadn't gone through those things, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be having these conversations. I wouldn't have met you folks. So my hope comes from a place that's outside of politics. My hope comes from knowing that my God is a capital G God with a capital P plan, and his plan might not be exactly what I want. But when things when they don't go my way, I'm actually supposed to take joy in that because it's his plan, not mine. Now, you'll notice on that big, beautiful bus out there, there's a Bible verse on the back. Why is there a Bible verse on the back of the Let's Talk Alberta bus? Because somebody at one point told me that I have to stop being so religious and I shouldn't talk about Jesus. Well, that's not going to happen. That Bible verse is on the back of that bus because Because for me, this is about doing what we're supposed to do. And I believe we're supposed to talk to each other. That Bible verse is Jeremiah 29:7. And it says, and also seek the peace and prosperity of the city in which I put you into exile. How many believers in this room feel like they're exiled in their own country? For it is in the peace, or it is in the peace of the city that you will find your prosperity. So as a person of faith, you're actually commanded to be involved and have these conversations and seek the peace and prosperity of the place that you're at, because that's what's going to contribute to yours. And there is no guarantee that it's going to work, by the way. As a matter of fact, the Bible's pretty clear as a believer that you're going to be persecuted. It's clear on that. But we do what we're supposed to do, not because we're convinced that the outcome is what we want, but because we have hope in the plan that we're just a part of. And I know there's some people in this room that are like, oh, why is this guy preaching? I share these things because this is what I believe. And this is what gives me hope. And if you're interested in that hope, find somebody beside you that's a believer and ask them for that good news, because I think it would probably be better and easier if you had that same kind of hope that I do.
All right, it's Warren again. I know in my heart, I believe I know the answer to this question, but maybe not everybody is. And this lady, when she was talking about the social programs and federal funding for programs that are supplied in Alberta, I was the chair of the board here for Community Futures for 9 years and the vice chair of the provincial board for 5 years. And they're very worried about where their funding is going to be coming from. So my answer always back was, if we're not sending $25 billion to Ottawa, where do you think that $25 billion, your payment pool comes from, is that $25 billion? So if it stays here, that's 27 offices in Alberta with 800 volunteers doing 1,400 new small businesses every year in Alberta, which is driving our economy. That will still stay here. That's a program that we can implement, absolutely, but maybe not everybody knows that. And do you guys have any thoughts? Have you even talked about that when you're thinking about a new budget going forward, once this happens and goes in there? Have you looked at we can cover all the federal programs so that the social programs are still here, and the ones that are funded federally stay the good ones that will supply value to the economy?
So yes, that has been considered, and my friend Keith Wilson is going to be releasing a paper shortly that actually outlines and addresses those specific things. So there's a lot of things the federal government does that we would have to do, right? We'd have to take care of borders, we'd have to take care of currency, all those types of things. So there is a bunch of stuff that has to be done. I just want to make sure everyone knows that these are things that people are considering. And in addition, Quebec has been considering this for 60 years. Quebec has a book, like it's 6 inches thick, on all of the things that would have to carry over to Quebec from the federal government. So that is being considered. I'm looking forward to the white paper that Keith is releasing to show some of that stuff. But another thing that I try to be very clear on, and I'm not speaking as a politician or a leader of any kind, but I will always advocate for through the transition that nobody's left behind. So if there's something funded federally, and by the way, the federal government doesn't actually fund anything. They take our money and then give it back in the form of transfers to fund it. So it's our money anyway. Anything that they're currently supplying to an Albertan would have to be picked up by the new nation of Alberta. No questions asked, no debate, no nothing. We cannot leave people behind. We have to make sure that the transition, should it happen from a province to a nation, considers that there are people that rely on those things, and it's our duty and obligation to make sure that it continues until we find something better, at least.
Hi, my name is Jerry, and this is more of a statement, but anyway, it is triggered by the New World Order comments that were coming out. So what I'd like to ask the crowd here, who has spent time in Russia? I worked there for over a year, a couple of years, and it was after the communist system failed, but it still was in place. You know what the people were like, and this is where we're going. And And I think people should really think about the New World Order or the old communist system, because they're very similar, very, very similar. And this is the railroad we're on, and it's going downhill fast.
It's really cool that you mentioned that, because Russia is one of the few countries that is standing up against the New World Order. Like they are, yeah, they're one of few. It's control, right? At the essence of this whole thing, it's about controlling people, and it's for your own safety, because if you're not controlled, then you're gonna emit too much CO2, or you're gonna have too much of an environmental footprint. In Shane's case, it's too much methane. You get the point, though, right? So that's I like that you brought that up.
It's just, you know, like it's from the past, but it's what was happening in that country at that time, and we're on that road right now, and you know, it concerns me, and it should, all these folks here, it should concern them too. You know, like, you know, just because you know, well, you know, New World Order, you know, like there's quite a bit of process that's going on behind the scenes on that, you know, and we should be really concerned.
So, talking about Russia during the communist period, it was the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republics. Marxists and Leninists believe that to achieve communism, you first need to go through socialism. And we all know what happened in the Soviet Union and in China, the oppression of peoples. And I think of a Gulag survivor. His name is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He recounts what it was like as Russia was entering communism. And he said that if people knew how bad it was going to get, they would have defended their homes with fireplace tools, with anything they had at their disposal. They just simply didn't understand the challenges that was before them. And I think this is where it can tie back in with the comments about faith. There's also fear. There's the fear of taking action to stop the trend towards socialism. That risks you potentially getting in trouble. With the federal government bringing in laws about speech and censorship, there's risks that you could face jail time now for quoting certain parts of the Bible or the Quran. There's that fear of standing up now. But then, tying back in with what Solzhenitsyn said, if you do nothing, there's the future risks where, say, a form of secret police comes in. In Canada now, there's talks about getting the power to search emails without warrant, other forms of investigation into your private affairs. There's that risk of how things can get worse if not doing anything now. So you can have faith in a higher power to do what you need to do now to make that small sacrifice before having to make a bigger sacrifice in the future by doing nothing. But there's also the similar element of fear, where you understand your fear of now, your fear of later, and know that you need to act now. I know I'm speaking very generally, but we can apply this to independence as well. I'll leave it to you to find that.
Well, and seeing so I'm a little bit preachy tonight, I just want to remind everybody, there will come a time when you can't buy or sell without doing what the government says. There will come a time you'll be persecuted beyond belief for what you believe. There will come that time. And I don't know when that's going to be, or if it's soon or what, but if you are concerned about those things, number one, seek the peace and prosperity of the city in which you're exiled. Do what you can to change what you can when you can. Be involved. Number two, if it isn't going to happen, start getting stronger in your faith. Go back to church, read your Bible, do those things, like strengthen yourself in the way that you need to strengthen yourself to get through the things you're going to go through, because you will go through them. And again, you might not share my belief there, and that's totally okay. You can just take that second part where I said strengthen yourself in the ways that you can to get through what you're going to go through. But just know that life isn't always rosy, and it's almost guaranteed that we're going to have trouble. So we just stop worrying and do the best you can when you can, and talk to each other about it, and we'll have the best outcome, even though it might not be pleasant all the time.
And as I said at the end of my speech, we've got 3 bills that are already taking us well on our way towards it. Bill C8, Bill C9, which is law now as of July 18th, and then Bill C22. They're stripping away all your privacy, all of your you combine them taking the algorithm or the encryption off with the fact that you can be wiped off the interwebs. The inner tubes, as Ben Crane would say, and if you look at that, and we're well on our way to a total totalitarian government, very much so.
Ready?
Oh, it's definitely
Hi,
that way.
my name is Jim, and you gentlemen up there have got some good points, but I'm totally opposed to this skipping out on Alberta. And I want to give you the reason why I think this way. Now, I could be at the wrong meeting here. Maybe maybe this is the one for to separate.
Want to hear it.
But I'm opposed to it, and the reason being is that we. I'm losing it already. Anyways, the cost of, nobody's bringing up the cost of what it's going to cost to leave Alberta. It's going to cost millions, billions, and trillions of dollars. We send $13 billion to Ottawa every year, probably most of it's energy. But they are starting to come around and giving us the odd pipeline and getting things through. Let's talk to them about that kind of stuff.
I hear you. Yeah, absolutely. There would be a cost. You're 100% correct. The one thing that I want to mention before I talk a little bit about the cost is what the cost is of doing nothing. So the cost that we've experienced as Albertans and as Canadians in the last 20 years, and I'm sure that you've felt this as well, we've watched as our dollar has lost half of its purchasing power. That's a real thing. That's a cost. That's a really big cost. I mentioned earlier that Alberta has paid a cost of estimated $150 billion in investment capital leaving Alberta under these legislation we can't do anything about. The number for Canada is even worse. It's $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion is the cost for doing nothing in Canada in the last 20 years. Now, there's also some more costs that people don't realize. What is the cost to our kids for continuing with the status quo? We now live in a culture where our children are treated like little little social justice warrior experiments. And the government has tried, in some cases, to take the place of parents and take over raising children. That's a real cost. And it's because the values that we hold and the principles that we have as Albertans aren't reflected in the legislation that's coming down from the federal government. So that's something that I'll talk about the cost. Now, the real cost, if you're interested in the real cost estimated, because I don't have a crystal ball, of what Alberta independence may cost, we do have some information back there on that. And I did my best to try and be as honest as I can to say that, no, it's not going to be free. Yes, the cost may be high, but what we can recover and when we can recover it is it far surpasses the initial cost, even if it was Premier Smith's fictional $400 billion. And that's the number she threw out. I think the number that I have pegged back there, it's something like $155 billion. And that's actually backed up by an economist that doesn't agree with my position on Alberta independence. So there is 100% a cost, but you have to look at both sides. You have to look at the cost we're currently paying and the cost that we could pay and what the opportunity is in both. I'll ask this question, this final thing too. Do you believe that that Alberta being given the opportunity to apply for a pipeline is more of an opportunity than taking control of our wealth and resources fully, and not sending not $13 billion, but $30 billion to Ottawa, for which we don't get anything back? That's the question I ask.
I I don't know what to say, but anyways, I honestly don't think Alberta is going to survive by separating. We are going to be in financial, like it's all about the money. We can't survive. We're landlocked. No, seriously, we are landlocked, but we are getting the pipeline to the coast. Do you think that BC isn't going to put some kind of tax on that pipeline there when we're not part of the country? Do you think Ottawa is not going to cut her pensions and cut all this stuff? I know it's written in law, but laws are changed all the time. So like it's all about the finance. Like in 2 to 3 years, this Alberta country, whatever it is,
the landlocked right now, instantly. First off, what are we now?
What are we what?
What are we now? Are we landlocked now?
We are not really, no.
We are landlocked within the federal policies, landlock us right now. However, as a nation, international law gives us access to tidewater, and that is in international law. Right now, if we do a pipeline through BC, Carney has already promised a good portion of the profits to BC. Under international law, that doesn't happen. Those pipelines are ours. Then they cannot charge. Look at Europe. Europe is a great example under international law. How do you think Switzerland gets products to port? They actually have a port in Amsterdam that is theirs. They are guaranteed that under international law. They have access to tidewater. Every country gets access to tidewater. You take a look at a bunch of the countries in Central Europe, they all have access to tidewater. So their product is guaranteed by the United Nations that they can get. And it doesn't matter if they're a member of the United Nations either, because that international law applies to them. So, and they're not charged a tariff to get it to port because of that international law. So we would actually save money under the current system by having our own nation. That's number one on that. Number two, we are policy locked as a nation right now, or as a province. We cannot move across an international border to the United States, which we could go through as a country. They are our largest trading partner. Over 85% of all of our natural resources go south, and our trade is to them. That would be easier as our own nation than it is now, where we can't even make a 400-foot connection on the Keystone Pipeline. Carney and Trudeau will not allow us to make the connection. It's right to the U.S. border. We are 430 feet from our termination point to their termination point, and they will not allow us to make that connection. And that is federal government. That is the largest pipeline ever put through, and they will not allow us to make connection. If we make that connection, we have access to Port Arthur, Texas. And if we have access to Port Arthur, Texas, under international law as a country, we can ship right out of Port Arthur, Texas.
I'm gonna answer your concern about whether we think Alberta could survive. I know we could, and the reason we could is because of people like you. because you're taking the time to actually think about these things and have the conversations. If you're asking the questions, it means you're interested in the answer, right?
I'm asking the question, we can't survive because what's going to happen is they're going to put tariffs on pipelines. They're going to put everything on. Alberta is going to be its own country. And eventually, we're going to run out of money. We're not going to be able to get the.
I hear you. I hear you. You have some valid concerns about what Alberta may face in the future. I have those same concerns, but I know that Albertans are willing to deal with these things. Like you ask, for instance, you ask about a tariff. What if BC tariffs us? Okay, let's pretend that you're British Columbia and I'm Alberta. Yeah. And you say, Alberta, we're mad at you because you're self-determining. We're going to tariff your pipeline. I'll say, okay. I'm going to remind British Columbia politely that the feedstock for the Burnaby refinery that feeds the Vancouver International Airport comes from Alberta. And I'm going to say, I'm really sorry that you feel this way, British Columbia, but if you're going to tariff me, then I'm not going to be able to ship your feedstock for your international airport anymore. And by the way, if we have to do this tariff thing, you need to ship things from the Port of Vancouver via road to Toronto. They need those things. And you need things from Toronto to Vancouver. We're going to have to stop every truck and inspect it for rats. And we're going to have to tariff you. Now, I don't want to tariff you. I would much rather we have an economically beneficial trade relationship between us, because that's what we've always done, except right now, we actually can't do that because we have to apply and go through the federal government. So you see, we moved from a situation where we can't actually negotiate with each other to finally, for the first time, having open and honest conversations about what the trade really is. And we're doing it from a position of strength rather than from a position of subservience to the federal government. So do you see what I'm saying? This, what you're describing, each one of those things is a reason why Alberta must become independent. If you're concerned about our trade and our pipelines, we need to be able to negotiate like the adults in the room. If you're concerned about the amount of money we have, we need to stop hemorrhaging $30 billion a year to Ottawa and manage it ourselves. If you're concerned about the way money's being spent, we need to stop enabling Canada to send $45 billion to another nation to fund their war while our veterans starve and freeze on the street. You see? These things, what you're saying, those are all legitimate concerns about an independent Alberta. But I do need to ask you, under the current situation, those concerns still exist. The only difference is we can't talk about them as equals, but we can as an independent nation of Alberta. And I want to go through all of those things, but in the interest of time, I would really appreciate it if you would take a couple of those trifolds, because almost all of the questions that you asked, we do our absolute best to be honest with the answers, and we put them in those trifolds. And if you have a disagreement or you think I'm wrong on something like that, the email address is there. Send us an email and we will absolutely get back to you. But I think that just the fact that you're willing to stand up in a room of people that largely disagree with you and ask the questions and share your concerns tells me that Alberta is grown up enough to actually start doing these things by herself.
So there's a couple things I would like to add to that. So when America became independent from Britain, during the war, no American soldiers set foot in Michigan or captured any Michigan territory. Nonetheless, once Britain acknowledged American independence, they received Michigan as part of the deal, and ultimately territories all the way up to the 49th parallel. Britain gifted America these things because they realized that they're going to have to be friends. They're going to have to play nice. England needed American goods. And even though they were at war and they just came to peace, Britain knew that they needed the US, so they did everything they could to become friends. And there is going to be costs on both sides if independence does happen. there can be consequences or punishments from one side against the other going both ways if they don't want to play nice. So it's in everyone's best interests to act in good faith, because Canada needs Alberta's oil. Canada needs Albertan railways to get from Eastern Canada, goods from Eastern to Western Canada, and vice versa. We need to work together, and I think we will. There's a lot of fear over this, but if it push came to shove, we would play nice with each other, because there's too much consequence if we don't. Now, for people that still believe that independence would damage Alberta more than it would help Alberta and cannot be convinced otherwise, I think it is still healthy to have a referendum on independence and have this conversation for independence. Thinking about Quebec, they didn't have 51% of the vote in their referendums. Nonetheless, they've achieved more autonomy and more recognition as its own sovereign entity in partnership with Canada. This referendum is an opportunity for Albertans' grievances to be heard and understood and respected. Sometimes you have to escalate a situation to de-escalate. I feel that we're in an abusive relationship. And if our grievances are not made known, and if we're not willing to take measures to be respected, we're not going to be respected. So for someone that feels that separatism or independence would be damaging, it is still a conversation that needs to be had.
No, you can ask him.
This is about a question about property rights. When Alberta is becoming a country, nations have their own property, or it's now crown owned or provincially owned. How is going to be? Are they gonna private property? Is that gonna be taken away? Is it protected or?
I love this question, because I used to think that we had property rights in Canada, and we actually don't. Did you know that's one thing that was removed, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms out of the Constitution? That was not included, property rights. And there's a reason for it. If we have true property rights, the government can't come and chain your business closed without proving it's justified. If you have property rights, the government can't tell you to hand over your 1903 Luger handgun because it's too dangerous and the criminal, you might use it as in a crime. We don't have property rights in Canada right now. And this is one of my major grievances for the within Confederation, like a sovereign Alberta with a united Canada. One of my major grievances is property rights. I think that an independent nation of Alberta should absolutely enshrine property rights in the Constitution. Freedom of speech, which we do not have in Canada. You cannot find that anywhere in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or Constitution. Property rights have to be in there. If you don't have those two things, you cannot be free people, because they can use you are guaranteed these rights and freedoms unless demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, and then the government can come and take your stuff, right? So wonderful question. Property rights is something that we could look forward to that we don't actually have right now.
Is that the Supreme Court of Canada is basically making a lot of laws, and Canada has adopted UNDRIP. Now, my understanding, and I could be totally flipped on this, I don't know, but this is my understanding, that each province has the right to their property. And my understanding, again, is that a large portion of the reason why BC is in the position it's in of losing, well, they say they're guaranteeing property rights, but I don't really trust that part, but it's because the BC government also signed on to UNDRIP. And if Alberta were to sign on to UNDRIP by a change of government, God help us if it happened, we could potentially lose our property rights also. Now, maybe I'm totally flipped out, but that is kind of my understanding of the potential way things could go.
Absolutely, it could. If nobody showed up at the polls and 4 people showed up and they voted for that, that could happen. I don't believe that that would happen in Alberta, just because Albertans we believe in property rights and we want them. So I think that when the time came, we would show up and make sure that that's included. Now, when you're talking about what's happening in BC, it's an interesting thing. British Columbia never signed treaties with the First Nations people there. They just kind of went there and they had little mini wars from time to time, and the gold rush stuff was interesting, but they never did that. So the claim is not necessarily property, but title. Now, title isn't something that, it doesn't mean you own the property. It means you have the benefit and enjoyment of that property while you hold title. That's why if you don't pay your property taxes, you don't keep the title to your property. I want Albertans to own the dirt. I want them to own their property, period. I want First Nations people to own their property. Did you know that First Nations people, the reserve land that First Nations occupy is owned by the federal government? Did you know that? Did you know all of the houses there are owned by the federal government? A First Nations person actually can't go get a loan against their home if they live on reserve to start a business. I think this is an absolute travesty. So yes, we need property rights. First Nations people need true property rights. We need to stop pretending that being custodians of a plot of land and just allowing people to be there is helpful, and actually flip the script and give people their property rights.
I think we need to wrap this up. I got a comment and a question.
I'll catch you after for the remainder of that.
Okay, comment.
I was thinking Canada, is a great country. Separating, Alberta separating is a horrible thought. And but that being said, we have to move forward somehow. So I do agree with separation. The other thing is that Saskatchewan and BC and everybody provinces want to join. Is that going to be a thing on the board too, right? Are they, because once they see Alberta moving forward and actually prospering well, I know they'll want to join. But is that going to be a thing on the table?
That would be up to us. That would be up to the people of it would have to be a decision by the people. If we want if we want Saskatchewan to join us, they have to go through the same process that we just went through. And then if we decide that we want to form a union afterwards, that's up to the people if we want it or not. So it would be the people that would have to decide that.
I agree with your first statement in that you said Canada's a great country. I 100% agree. I feel incredibly blessed to live in a country like Canada where I can have open conversations about something even so consequential as leaving the country. That means a lot to me. I also agree that the idea of Alberta independence is horrible. That is a horrible thought to me. My feelings about it, I feel sick to my stomach that we have to have this conversation. But the facts don't care about my feelings. And the fact is, if we don't do something different, the values and principles that we believe in here in Alberta as Albertans will not be preserved. So I have to get past my feelings about the terrible thing about having to leave. And I have to focus on the future and what the opportunity is ahead and how that can also motivate and benefit the rest of Canada and Canadians who are feeling just like me. Right? When Alberta stands up and we're leaders in this, there are other Canadians that are going to be like, you know what? I don't like this path either. And they're going to put some pressure. And I believe that if Alberta takes a stand, it is very likely that more Canadians than not will also take a stand against what's going on and maybe put a stop to what's going on in their provinces as well.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm curious on, after an independent Alberta, how many approximate years would it take to be fully net positive across the board?
So that the math that I did back there with the help of my friend Claude AI, by the way, it suggests before 10 years. And that's having quite the surplus. There's low estimate, something, I think it was 1 to 2 years. Mid-range, I think, was 4. And then the top end was 4 to 10. And I kind of defer to the 4 to 10 because who knows? But I don't have a crystal ball. I did my best to put the math out there. But on the other hand, I can tell you that one of the calculations in there is share of the national debt, right? Does anyone in the room believe that the national debt is going to be less next year than it is this year? Okay, so there is a sense of urgency here. If we want to limit the cost, we must act in a reasonable amount of time, because the cost to leave will only increase inevitably, because we're going to share a cost of that national debt that we don't control how it's spent. So that's something to think about as well.
Hi, my name is Joshua Qualley, and I'd like to thank you all for your courage. I believe we're in a very brief time window in that with AI and technology, quantum computers, and the system that's being rolled out, if Alberta doesn't make a decision here now, we may not get another chance due to C22, 23, 9, and all these other things. I personally would rather, if there was a deal that I liked or didn't like, I'd rather have that conversation with someone that's maybe 9 hours away than someone that's like 50 hours away, right? Just simple math here. A trucker convoy going to Edmonton or Calgary to make a change peacefully is much easier than going across the whole country to the other side of the planet. Just simple. If there's a finance or math problem, it's easier to work out that deal with somebody in Calgary or Edmonton by a large margin. And if you look at some of the other very wealthy countries with resources that are even similar to Alberta, I believe that with an independent country, we would have, in short order, one of the most powerful currencies on the planet. And we could also follow other models where we share those oil revenues or those resource revenues with the citizens, and we could have a better life. Like, I can't even take a flight from here to Edmonton. I got to go to Calgary and then to Edmonton. It's not because we don't have money, but the people that are taking the money don't want to give it back. They want to spend it on other things. But those are people that are invested in things that are on the other side of the planet, pretty much, right? I would rather deal with people that are closer to home.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up here, but I do want to mention when the people that reap the benefits for good decisions are making the decisions, cool things happen. In the 60s, when equalization started, and Alberta started its journey to hemorrhaging $600 billion translated to $1.2 trillion in today's dollars into Confederation, for which we didn't get anything back. Norway started saving. Norway's oil fund this year is $3.3 trillion.
0.6.
How much?
3.6.
Oh, 3.6 now. It's gone up since I looked. That's $585,000 plus per citizen. That's what you can accomplish when you're making the decisions for yourself instead of someone else making them for you. And I would just encourage people to think about that as you go on and you're pondering some of these things, no matter what side of the conversation you're on. Just ask yourself, if you want something different than the status quo, do you believe that Alberta and Albertans could do better than is happening right now? And if you do, then consider your options. And other than that, I think we should just keep talking about it.
I think we're going to wrap this up. Ladies and gentlemen, your speakers of tonight, Elliot, Chris, and Shane. Thank you for coming. More information on Let's Talk Alberta. If you want to have a donation, go to letstalkalberta.gmail.com. Thank you for being here.
Now you should be able to hear me. Oh, right on. Well, there you go, folks. That was our Let's Talk Alberta in Grande Prairie. It was awesome. My phone died partway through. I was trying to get some of the online questions. Unfortunately, my phone died before I got a chance. But I do remember one. Yeah, there should be sound now. I can see the little green dots. I do remember a question from our friend Andy. Andy asked something like, if Alberta can separate from Canada, why couldn't Edmonton separate from Alberta? And that's a really good question. First, I'll point out that for what it's worth, international law, it talks about regions that have established areas like a province, right? A province has borders, and it's easily identified by those borders. So international law deals with that particular thing. Now, if you don't talk about international law, we could just talk about that logically. So if Edmonton chose to become an independent or rural left Edmonton or something like that, it doesn't seem to me like many people, if certainly not the majority, would be receptive to something like that. I mean, talk about putting a border up around Edmonton. I don't think anybody would be happy with that. Now, is that to say that people couldn't decide to do it? I guess they could decide to do it. I would advocate against it. And I believe that for that to happen, I think Alberta would have to be independent first and Edmonton would have to secede or something like that. But I think that would be a really tough sell. If you think it's a good idea, you should support the idea of Alberta independence per se, and have Alberta become an independent nation. And then you can start a campaign for Edmonton to secede from Alberta. And if you bring enough people with you and you get a majority, you could accomplish that. I don't think it's something that would happen, and I wouldn't put my time and effort into it. But that's not to say it isn't a possibility, just not probable. And I'm sorry, folks, that's the only question I remember. I know there was a couple more in there. I'm just going to quickly scroll through. Yeah, the comments were pretty spicy today. There's a couple guys having a bit of a back and forth. It's an emotional thing. I just hope that whoever's commenting can try and let's try and understand where the other side's coming from as best we can. I know you're probably already doing that, and it's frustrating and get angry sometime. Try and find something at least that you agree on, and let's end on that rather than the spiciness. Because you know what happens when you go to bed after a spicy meal? Yeah, crazy dreams and up in the middle of the night to, well, you know what I'm talking about. Other questions? Yeah, so to the 4E Canadian person, if you have legitimate questions, just put them in the comments or attend an event. I'm happy to answer them in person if possible. You can send an email to letstalkalberta@gmail.com. That's also the email e-transfer address, coincidentally, and I'll try and answer them.
You didn't shut down your debit machine, did you?
No, I didn't do that. And I'm sorry, folks. I can't go back through all the questions. We got to get out of here. But yeah, thanks for watching. I see that I left the banner for back of the Q&A at 8:30. I guess that's what happens when you try and do too much. So we'll see you at the next thing. I believe it's going to be a parade somewhere. And I know we're in Redcliffe next week. You should see a flyer in the mailbox for that one. And then we're on a bit of a bus tour across southern Alberta. We're going to be all over the place. You can check out letstalkalberta.com to find out when and where we'll be. It's also posted on our social media, so at Let's Talk Alberta on Facebook. It's probably already on at the Whistle Stop Cafe as well. And I look forward to seeing you folks in, closer to where you're at in the Let's Talk Alberta bus. Have a great night, everyone. See you later.